I was 7 days into being frozen when I stopped being able to feel my own toes, and that was what finally woke me. Winter, 1980. Solstice. Deep in the mountains, a village called Kaoshantan. Wind screamed against the paper window like something with a grudge, and the room I woke in was cold enough to frost my breath before it left my mouth. "Husband, you're awake?" My wife's voice, small, frightened, shaking. I turned my head. In the dim light, Lin Xiu had curled herself around our daughter Nyonyo like a hen shielding a chick, and the threadbare quilt covering them didn't even reach their feet. Nyonyo's face was blue with cold. Her little hands were fisted in her mother's collar, and even in sleep her mouth worked at nothing. The reflex of a child who's gone too long without food. Memory hit me like a landslide. I knew this morning. I'd lived it before. This was the day my second brother went to the county seat for a matchmaking meeting. The day our mother took the last of the family's white flour and baked it into buns for him to carry, while my wife and daughter didn't get so much as a bowl of warm gruel. The same day Lin Xiu, half mad with hunger, went digging for frozen potatoes in the field and fell through river ice and never fully recovered. The same day I was driven into the mountains in a blizzard to earn my brother's bride price and nearly died to a bear for the trouble. I wasn't dead. I looked down at my own hands, calloused, scarred, but whole, and my eyes burned. Heaven had given me this life back, given me my wife and daughter back before either of them died, given me the chance to undo everything. I swung my legs off the bed and stepped into empty air. My shoes were gone. The new cotton ones Lin Xiu had spent half a month stitching by lamplight. Where are my shoes? Lin Xiu flinched, snatched her own feet back under her, and held out a pair of ragged straw sandals with the toes worn through, her voice cracking. "Husband, were mine first. Mother came by earlier and took. She said second brother has his matchmaking meeting today, and for the family's face, he should wear your new shoes just for the day. For the family's face. You're the eldest. You're supposed to give way." I'd swallowed that line my whole first life. Worn straw sandals until I lost 2 toenails to frostbite, so my brother could parade around some woman's family looking respectable, while mine were ground into the dirt. Not this time. I left the sandals where they lay and walked out barefoot onto the frozen ground. The main room told a different story. A firewall keeping it warm, the smell of scallion pancakes and rice porridge thick enough to taste. My whole family sat around a table loaded with white rice porridge, 2 plates of golden pancakes, and a dish of salted duck eggs glistening with oil. Eat the egg while it's hot, second son. You're the family scholar, good for the brain. Our mother, Li Tsuhua, doting as ever, was stuffing the only 2 peeled eggs into my brother Zhao Shanhai's bowl. Shanhai, dressed in a crisp mouse suit, hair slicked back, chewed with his nose wrinkled, tapping his new shoes with his chopsticks. Ma, sister-in-law's stitching's no good. Soles packed too tight, pinches my foot. I'll need real leather shoes once I'm in the county. Can't let the girl's family see homespun cloth shoes and think we're paupers. Third brother, Zhao Shanlin, sprawled in his chair like a puddle of mud, a cigarette hanging from his lip, turning a bright red hair ribbon over in his fingers. That ribbon had cost me 2 good rabbit pelts at market. I'd handed every fun of the 4 yuan to my mother, secretly holding back 2 cents to buy it, the only New Year's gift my daughter had ever gotten. He struck a match, didn't light the cigarette, leaned it toward the ribbon instead. My ribbon. Nyonyo, trailing behind me, saw it and wailed, lunging forward to save it. "Papa gave me that. Don't burn it." Shanlin kicked her before she got close, the same motion you'd use on a stray dog, and struck the match against the ribbon in the same breath. The red thread caught and curled to ash, the smell of it foul in the warm room. "Heh, burns fast." He looked at the little pile of black char, grinning. "Cheap junk anyway. Better off gone." Nyonyo tumbled, wailing, clutching her chest. Lin Xiu flew to her, tore open the ragged jacket, and there, printed across that thin little chest, was a boot print, black and purple, an adult's full weight behind it. "What's all this crying for? Money-losing brat." My mother slammed her chopsticks down, eyes narrowing to slits. "Wailing at breakfast, shut it, or I'll throw you out to the wolves." I stood in the doorway, looked at that boot print, listened to my daughter's screaming. Something in my head, the last thread I'd call reason, simply snapped. I didn't say a word, didn't even look at my mother. I crossed that threshold like a wounded bear coming out of hibernation, murder in every step. "Oh, eldest is up." My mother saw me looming in the doorway and, without missing a beat, shoved a bowl of watery vegetable broth toward the table's edge. Standing there gawking? Drink up and go fetch water. I ignored her, kicked the long bench out of my path, and walked straight to Shanlin. What are you looking at, big brother? Something to say? He sneered up at me, still spoiling for more. What? Feeling sorry for that little money. I didn't waste words. My hand closed around his wrist before he could pull it back, and I squeezed. Bone gave way under my grip. He screamed and slid off the chair. Which foot did you kick her with? I didn't wait for an answer. My knee came up into his chest, hard enough to send a grown man flying into the firewood pile, blood on his lips, eyes rolling back. My mother shrieked and came at me, nails out, clawing for my face. I turned my hip into the strike and put a boot into her stomach instead. She went rolling across the floor and sat down hard, wailing that heaven should strike me dead. The whole room dissolved into chaos. Only Shanghai still sat frozen at the table, an egg clenched in his fist, staring at me like I was some kind of demon. I turned to him, to his new shoes, to the bowl of porridge still steaming on the table. Big brother, what are you? He tried to stand, puffed himself up. I'm a steak cadre, you. Cadre my ass. I grabbed the edge of the heavy table and flipped it whole. The porridge, the pancakes, the pickled vegetables, all of it arced through the air and came down on Shanghai in one scalding wave. He screamed loud enough to shake the rafters, his glasses flying off and shattering on the floor. Broken porcelain, spilled porridge, the ash of a burned ribbon. I walked toward him, barefoot on the wreckage, and told them exactly what I'd decided the moment I woke up. The eldest brother you've been kicking around his whole life, he's dead. Starting today, nobody in this house walks out unless we settle this properly. Shanlin came at me with a rusty kitchen knife next, grabbed it off the table, screaming that he'd gut me for hitting him. I didn't even turn my head to look. A lifetime of surviving bears and wolves in the mountains had sharpened my instincts past anything a man like him could threaten. I stepped inside the blade, caught his arm, and drove my fist into his elbow. The joint went the wrong way. He screamed and dropped the knife, and before he'd finished falling, I put a knee into his face. Hard, glancing, final. He went down and stayed down. My mother lunged at me, screaming that I'd kill her son. I struck her once, open-handed, and she spun into the porridge and didn't get up for a while. Then I turned to Shanghai, cornered, terrified, stammering about being a cadre, about going to the police. I hit him twice, hard enough to split his lip, then pinned him and pulled the new shoes off his feet myself, tearing his socks in the process, and tossed them to Lin Xiao. Take these home and wash them. We're not too proud. Then I crouched in front of him, patted his swelling cheek, light, almost gentle, and asked, quiet enough that only he could hear, did he still plan on going to that meeting today? Did he want the matchmaking family, and the man his mother was so proud of, to learn what he'd actually done to the sent-down girl at his school, and where he'd taken her afterward to end it? He went white, wet himself where he sat. He begged. He handed over the 50 yuan in his pocket without being asked twice. And when I pointed at the old hunting rifle on the wall and the trapline hanging in the corner, he told me to take whatever I wanted, just please don't go to the county. I took the rifle. I took the traps. I emptied their winter grain into a sack, flour and cornmeal both, slung it over one shoulder, tucked the new quilt under my arm, and walked to the door. From today, we're square. I told the room, not looking back. Anyone comes near my wife or my daughter again. I brought the rifle, but down on the doorframe hard enough to crack the wood. I'll send him to see the king of hell. Xiaoer, get Nyonyo. We're going home. She was still staring, stunned, but she gathered our daughter close and followed me out into the storm without a backward glance, leaving that wrecked, howling house behind us. The place we walked to wasn't much of a home, a collapsing mud hut at the foot of Black Bear Gully that the village called Ghost's Despair. Half the thatched roof had rotted through. But when I dropped that 100+ pounds of grain on the floor, the sound of it landing was the finest thing I'd heard in either of my lives. I hung the rifle on a nail, tossed the new quilt onto the Kong, and told Lin Xiao we weren't eating gruel tonight. We were going to steam bread, fry cakes, eat the white flour until we didn't want to see it anymore. Nyonyo poked the flour like it might be snow, then smelled her finger and asked if snow was supposed to taste sweet. I knelt down and told her. This wasn't snow. This was what only her uncle and grandmother used to eat. And from now on it was our food too. Every day, every meal, until she got sick of it. That night, while Lin Xiu worked the dough, I sat by the fire and cleaned the old rifle by touch. No oil, just melted snow water and a rag on a stick. She asked if I really meant to go back out into the storm after dark. I told her, having grain wasn't enough. This was our housewarming, and a housewarming needed meat. I found a roe deer bed by scent and touch alone. 2 big bucks sheltering under a fallen tree, 30-some meters off, at the outer edge of what my homemade black powder gun could reliably do. I gambled on both barrels of luck and 30 years of aim, waited for a gust to cover the sound, and fired. One dropped where it stood. The other I finished with the knife. 130 caddies of meat between them, more than I'd dared hope for. I carried them home on my shoulders, dropped them on the floor with a crash that shook plaster from the ceiling, and told my wife to get the water boiling. That night, the whole ruined hut filled with the smell of roasting fat and steamed bread, and for the first time since I'd woken up in this life, nobody in my family went to sleep hungry. Back at the old house, the mood was rather different. No one had hauled water, so the jar sat empty. No one had split dry wood, so the stove choked on wet green logs and filled the room with smoke instead of heat. Shanlin lay curled on the Kong, his wrists swollen black, his nose shattered flat, moaning that he was dying. Shanhai huddled under 2 blankets, still too frightened by the words public indecency to move. My mother knelt at the stove coughing on smoke, cursing my name between fits. Then my little sister Zhao Xiaoyu came home from school, new leather shoes and all, and found the house reeking and everyone howling. When she heard what had happened, she didn't believe a word of it. Not that her spineless eldest brother had broken anyone's bones. She marched off into the storm to go scold some sense into me herself, already composing the speech where I begged her forgiveness. She got as far as our door before the smell hit her. Meat, real meat, fat crackling in a pan, richer than anything the school cafeteria ever served. Her stomach growled before her pride caught up with her fury. I was hiding food from the family while they starved. She kicked the door open ready to scream at me, and found me sitting cross-legged on a warm Kong, a bowl of stewed venison steaming in front of me, a pile of fist-sized steamed buns on the stove, Nuno gnawing happily on a bone bigger than her own fist. I didn't even look up right away. I finished my bite, chewed it loud on purpose, let the grease sit visible at the corner of my mouth, then glanced at her standing frozen and half-frozen in the doorway. Well, look who it is. Our house scholar. Not enough good eating at home, so you came sniffing around my den. That set her off proper. She marched in, dropped her school bag on the Kong hard enough to spray dust into Lin Xiu's bowl, and launched into her script. Mother's practically ill with grief, 2nd brother's soaked in porridge and shivering, 3rd brother can't get off the Kong, and here I was gorging myself. If I brought the meat back, apologized to Shanghai, and returned the grain, she said, we could all still be a family. Then, with the same offhand cruelty she'd shown her whole life, she pulled the red scarf from around her own neck and tossed it into Lin Xiu's lap like a dirty rag, complaining it had gone bobbly and needed to be unraveled and reknit overnight, tighter this time. That scarf. I recognized every strand of that yarn. I asked her, quiet, whether it kept her warm. She said it was scratchy, cheap yarn. Why else would she want it redone? I reached over and pulled Nuno's bare foot into view. The sock gone, the heel worn through, toes red and cracked with frostbite, some of it weeping. That red yarn had been 2 fox pelts worth of my earnings, meant for socks to save my daughter's feet. Last winter, when Nuno's toes were already blistering, Xiaoyu had thrown a fit about needing a red scarf for a school recital instead, and our mother had made Lin Xiu unravel the half-finished sock and reknit it into that scarf. A year of Xiaoyu complaining it itched her neck. A year of my daughter's feet rotting and healing and rotting again in the same broken sock. Xiaoyu's face went scarlet. She snatched the scarf back, screaming that mother had ordered it, that she'd won a prize reciting on that stage, that it had brought honor to the family. What was a little frostbite compared to that? Her face was the family's face, she said. I was being small-minded. I repeated that phrase back to her once. Then I slapped her, hard enough to spin her half around, hard enough to split her lip and swell half her face before she'd even registered what happened. She stood there in shock, calling me a peasant, screaming that she was the family's future, that our mother had never once raised a hand to her. I told her I'd held back, that if I'd used real strength, her head would already be somewhere else. She sobbed that it was my own fault for having no talent, that if I'd gotten into university, I wouldn't be stuck doing manual labor. That did it. I asked her to search her own conscience. The year our father died, I placed third in the whole county on my exam. Teachers came to our door asking me to keep studying. I tore up that acceptance letter myself and went to haul sacks of grain to keep this family of ingrates fed instead. If I hadn't, who would be the one sitting here now, eating meat, wearing new clothes, attending university, sneering at calluses? Her or me? She had no answer. Whatever pride she'd walked in with cracked open and emptied out completely, and she stood there gasping for air that wouldn't come. I took the scarf back from her hands, tore it, and laid it at my daughter's frostbitten feet. A rag from now on, nothing more. Then I told her the debt was paid, with interest, and to take her precious face and get out. She ran home sobbing and told her version to our mother in Shanghai, who were only too happy to twist it into a plot. Shanghai, sharp in the way only a small, frightened man can be sharp, decided the real prize wasn't the meat itself, but a way to bury me for good, before I could ever use what I knew about him against him. He had a classmate running market enforcement the next day. A word in that man's ear, and my illegally hunted, unlicensed game would become a case of speculation and profiteering, a charge with teeth in that era, the kind that put a man behind bars. The next morning, I went to the county market anyway, carrying a fresh roe deer hide and 40 caddies of meat, with no idea what was waiting. I found my price fast, a state hotel chef named Lu Chongchun, portly and sharp-eyed, who recognized quality work on a hide the moment he saw it and offered 60 yuan for the lot. No argument. He'd nearly finished counting out the bills when 3 men with red armbands and rubber batons shoved through the crowd. Market enforcement, led by a pockmarked man everyone called Ma the Pockmarked, who happened to have gone to school with my brother. He accused me of selling diseased meat, of trading without a license, and ordered his men to seize everything. I didn't argue with him. I turned to Lu Chongchun instead, loudly enough for the whole crowd to hear, and asked whether a state hotel's head chef, someone who'd handled meat for 20 years, would really have been about to buy diseased goods, or whether accusing him of that was the same as accusing him of poisoning the county leadership. That put the fear of God into Ma the Pockmarked. Lu Chongchun, cornered into defending his own competence, roared that the meat was fresh and fine, and that anyone calling it diseased was either blind or slandering him on purpose. I pressed the advantage, asked, loud enough for the crowd, whether the man who'd tipped off the enforcers happened to wear glasses, talk like a scholar, and go by the name Zhao Shanhai. Ma flinched, gave himself away before he caught it, and the crowd turned on him in an instant, everyone recognizing exactly what this was. A state officer settling a family grudge with a government badge. Ma slunk off, humiliated, and Lu Chongchun handed over the full 65 yuan without another word of complaint, delighted enough by the show that he threw in an extra 5 as thanks. I gave the 5 back. A fair price was a fair price, and we shook on becoming acquainted, him telling me to knock on his back door anytime I had good game to sell. I walked away from that market with 60 yuan against my ribs, warm as a coal, and not one thought left to spare on my brother's schemes. I had a daughter with holes in her socks, and a co-op store waiting. I bought Nyonyo a thick pair of red acrylic socks, the good kind. The clerk's whole manner changed the moment she saw my money, plus 2 caddies of white rabbit candy, shell ointment for Lin Xiu's cracked hands, and cloth for new clothes. I walked home through the snow feeling, for the first time in either life, like a man who could actually provide. Lin Xiu cried when she saw the flour and the candy and the little shell tin of cream. Nyonyo bounced on the Kong in her new red socks, declaring them softer than her aunt's scarf had ever been. That afternoon, over bowls of meat and bread, I told Lin Xiu the house wouldn't survive a real blizzard. The roof was too old, the walls too thin, and that with the money we had left, we couldn't fix it properly. I told her I was going back into the deep mountains the next morning. I hadn't told her the real reason. In my last life, this same winter had brought the worst blizzard in decades, and somewhere out past Black Bear Gully was a boar the size of a small cow, half an ear torn off, 480 caddies of meat and fury, a beast that had once torn through 3 good hunting dogs and nearly crippled our militia captain before it finally went down. Everyone in the village had called it the Black Demon King. If I could take that thing down before the storm hit, the money would buy real lumber for the roof, real coal, enough to get us through winter without fear. I found it scratching tree the next morning, bark gouged clean off at chest height, black bristles caught in the wood like steel wire. I built a trap instead of hunting it head-on. A cable snare rig between two pines, backed by a row of sharpened stakes buried in the snow behind it, and drugged bread scattered as bait. Then I climbed a tree 50 meters back and waited. It came at midday, exactly as big and as scarred as memory promised. It hit the snare, panicked, drove itself backward onto the stakes, and still, even gutted and snared, came at me with enough fury to nearly rip the anchor tree out of the ground. I put a shot behind its ear from the tree, dropped it, and climbed down to finish the job, only for it to lunge up in one last burst of dying rage, tusks aimed at my leg. I met it with the knife instead of retreating, drove the blade up through its palate into its brain, and took the impact of its skull against my chest hard enough to fly backward into the snow, coughing blood. It was dead, really dead, this time. 480 caddies of the mountain's most feared animal, lying still at my feet. I didn't get to enjoy it. The wind carried the blood scent, and within minutes a wolf pack, 7 or 8 of them, appeared on the ridge above, drawn by the smell. I made a call a lot of hunters wouldn't have the stomach for. I let the boar go. One shot to the nearest wolf's skull scattered the rest long enough for me to skin the fallen wolf clean, in full view of the pack still watching from the brush, a message, plain as I could make it. Then I walked away, steady, unhurried, and left the boar behind as the price of passage. Behind me, the sound of the pack finally falling on the carcass told me the gamble had paid off. They'd be busy long enough that I could get clear. I came home with a wolf pelt and a fox instead of the boar, short of what I'd hoped for, but not empty-handed, and already turning over how I'd need a real hunting dog if I wanted to hold ground against a pack like that next time. I remembered a half-wild wolf dog cross kept chained up by an old, cantankerous trapper named Old Sun, a dog nobody could tame, mean enough to bite people. That dog, I decided, was going to be mine. That night, while I was still out in the storm, my mother and Shanlin came to the hut. They'd learned exactly how much I'd made at market and decided the debt for Shanlin's broken hand was 100 yuan, payable immediately, one way or another. They kicked the door in. Lin Xiu tried to hold them off with a fire poker. Shanlin, one arm in a sling, struck her with the other and split her forehead open on the edge of the stove when she fell. Nyonyo screamed for her mother. My mother pinned Lin Xiu down while Shanlin tore at her clothes, hunting for the money pouch she kept against her chest, the family's entire savings. That's the scene I walked into. I don't remember crossing the room. I remember the door coming off its frame under my shoulder, and after that, very little except my own voice and the small, high sound of my daughter crying that she was afraid. What happened to Shanlin in the minutes after? I won't dwell on it, and neither should you. It was ugly, and it was thorough, and it stopped only because Lin Xiu threw herself around my leg, sobbing that if I killed him I'd go to prison, and who would take care of her and Nyonyo then? My daughter's small voice saying Papa. Nyonyo scared did what nothing else could have. My foot, already raised for a blow that would have ended him, came down an inch short. I let him fall and turned to my mother instead. Told her, quietly, that this was the last time in my life I'd ever call her that. Told her everything I'd given this family since I was 6 years old gathering firewood, 8 years old earning work points in the fields. Every yuan I'd bled out for my brother's schooling, their gambling debts, their mistakes, while they returned the favor by robbing my wife and threatening my daughter the moment my back was turned. I told her to take her ruined son and get out, and that from that day on, the two families were strangers. If she came begging at my door in her old age, she wouldn't get so much as a cup of water from me. She didn't argue. She dragged Shanlin out into the blizzard without another word and didn't look back. The two of them tumbled out into the storm and were gone, swallowed up by snow and darkness. Silence dropped over the wrecked room, broken only by the creak of the broken door frame and the wind gusting straight through it. I stood there a moment, knife still unsheathed, dark blood dripping from the blade. My chest was still heaving, breath coming in ragged white clouds. That killing intent from a minute ago hadn't fully drained out of me yet. I stood frozen in the doorway, some animal part of me still braced for a threat that had already fled. Shauna. The small, careful sound of my wife's voice broke through it. Lin Xiu was curled at the edge of the Kong, Nyonyo shielded in her arms, Watching the stranger, I must have looked like with equal parts fear and worry. That was enough to pull me back. I let the breath out of me, along with whatever was left of that blood-scented rage, and crossed to the Kong, nearly tripping over the stool in my hurry. Xiaoer, Nyonyo, are you hurt anywhere? My voice came out rough. Did that animal touch either of you? Hearing me sound like myself again, some of the fear went out of Lin Xiao's face, until the lamplight caught me properly, and she saw the state of my jacket, black with frozen blood down the front, my face and neck streaked with it. I looked worse than Shanlin had. There's so much blood. Were you bitten? Let me see. She grabbed for my collar with shaking hands, terrified of what she'd find underneath. I caught her hands instead, small and freezing in mine, and told her to calm down. None of it was mine. Wolf blood, boar blood, from the skinning. I hadn't so much as broken skin. I flexed my arm to prove it, grinning at her until she half believed me. Then I saw Nyonyo, curled deep in the quilt, only her eyes showing, watching this blood-soaked stranger with the wide, frightened look of a fawn. I went to her, hand halfway out before I remembered it was covered in blood, and pulled it back, wiped it hurriedly on a clean patch of my clothes, and knelt down at the edge of the Kong until my eyes were level with hers. Nyonyo, it's Papa. Papa's home. She peeked further out, tears still streaked down her face, torn between crying and holding it in. Papa, you're bleeding, does it hurt? That nearly undid me more than anything else that night. That even frightened out of her mind, her first thought was for me. I told her it didn't hurt, that it was all the bad man's blood, that I'd already punished him for scaring her, and he'd never come back again. I made a joke about being like the Monkey King, sworn enemy of monsters, until she finally broke and reached for me, and I wrapped her up quilt and all and held her against my chest, feeling her shaking slowly settle. Once she'd calmed, I turned my attention to Lin Xiao's forehead, a coin-sized gash from where Shanlin had shoved her into the stove edge. The bleeding mostly stopped, but the wound still raw. I dug a handful of thistle out of my pack, chewed it into a green paste, and pressed it gently to the cut, telling her, half scolding, half something softer, that money lost could always be earned again, but I couldn't replace her. Then I nailed the broken door shut, took the wolf pelt I'd taken that morning, and hung it in across the gap in the frame. The wind died instantly, and the room seemed to warm by several degrees at once, that pelt hanging there like a guardian at the threshold. Nyonyo's stomach growled into the sudden quiet, and she went red with embarrassment. I laughed and told her a hungry stomach meant a strong girl, and pulled the frozen fox out of my pack, told her we were having stewed fox meat, and that once I skinned it, she'd get a fine red hat to match, like a little soldier. That night the fire caught again, and the smell of meat filled the room instead of fear. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, as long as I was still standing, it was the warmest place in the world. The next morning I set off for the county town again, but the previous night stayed with me the whole walk. A door I could nail shut wasn't enough. I'd be gone into the mountains for days at a time going forward, and Lin Xiao and Nyonyo needed more than a locked door if my family came sniffing around again while I was away. What they needed was something that didn't bark for no reason, but that would tear the throat out of anyone who crossed the threshold uninvited. My plan: sell the fox pelt, find old son at the logging camp about that half-wild dog of his, and pick up a house dog on the way home. At the state restaurant's back kitchen, I walked in on chaos, crashing pots, men shouting, someone screaming about scalding water. A pack of kitchen hands, shovels and rolling pins in hand, had a starving black dog cornered, half its ribs showing, back leg broken and hanging useless, and it was still fighting, blood on its teeth, refusing to curl up and take what was coming. One heavy-set cook lunged at it with a wet mop. The dog didn't flinch. It lunged up and clamped its jaws on the metal mop head, whipped its neck with enough force to yank the man off his feet and open a gap in the circle around it. Before anyone could recover, it broke for the only open path, straight at the doorway where I stood. It came at my throat without hesitation. No warning snap, straight for the kill. I let it get close enough to feel its breath, then sidestepped just enough, caught the loose skin at the back of its neck in one hand, and drove it down into the frozen ground with its own momentum. It fought me the whole way down, legs tearing furrows in the dirt, neck twisting for my wrist, but I had it pinned, and it wasn't getting free. Lu Changchun, the chef, recognized me mid-panic and came at me with a cleaver, ready to finish the dog off, Some half-wild hunting reject a neighboring trapper had sold him for 5 yuan after it turned on its own handler mid-hunt, and it had been trying to eat someone ever since. I told him to hold the knife. Something about the dog, the broad skull, the thick base of its tail, the way it had used the mop head trick to open an escape route instead of just fighting blind, told me this wasn't a mad dog. This was a soldier that had never had the right commander. I offered him the fox pelt, worth easily 8 times what he'd paid for the animal, and he took the trade without a second thought, glad to be rid of it. I bound its jaw and legs, took a blow to the head from it before it went still, and carried it off in my pack. One guard dog found. Now for the real prize. Old Son's cabin sat deep in the red pine forest, walled in logs and barbed wire like something built to keep things in rather than out. I found him sitting outside, sharpening a wolf fang into a pendant, and he greeted me with an insult about my father. A coward, he said, who'd once wet himself at the sound of a bear and crawled home to farm instead of hunting. I let it go. I knew what he was doing, testing whether I'd flare up or hold steady, whether I had any business being on his land at all. I told him plainly I hadn't come to relive old stories, and set the bound black dog down in the snow in front of him instead. Even trussed and muzzled, the dog thrashed and fought the ropes rather than lying still, full of fight it had no business having, given the state it was in. Old Son's contempt shifted the moment he saw that. He knelt, ran his hands down its spine, checked its jaw, its paws, took his time. Good bones, he said. A wolf's build in the hips, spirit that hadn't been broken, even bound and helpless. Then he asked where I'd found it, and when I told him, traded for a fox pelt worth 8 times what the cook had paid, his contempt turned to something closer to respect. He told me the dog had the makings of something rare. Then he warned me. It had suffered, and it had killed, and it would grow into something that would turn on me the moment I couldn't hold it, same as it had turned on its last owner. I told him that was exactly what I wanted. A dog that wasn't afraid wasn't worth having as a guard. That earned a long, searching look, the kind an old wolf gives a young one deciding whether it's worth letting into the pack. Then he laughed, called my father's cowardly blood a surprise to have produced someone like me, and led me inside. The cabin smelled of old tobacco, mildew, and something far larger and wilder than either. In the darkest corner, chains dragged against the floor, and 2 green eyes lit up in the black. The dog in my hands went rigid the instant it saw them, every predator's instinct in its body recognizing something above it in the order of things. Old Son cracked a whip in the air to keep the shape in the corner from lunging, and by the light through the window, I finally saw it properly. A wolf dog hybrid the size of a young calf, coat coarse and bristling gray, skull broad enough to look built rather than born, eyes canted up at the corners with none of a dog's warmth in them. A creature that looked at a man's throat, not his face. Old Son called it Green Dragon. Said it had killed a lone wolf that wandered into the yard the week before. 3 seconds, throat torn clean through. Even the black dog at my feet, for all its earlier ferocity, began to shake at the sight of it. Real fear, honest animal fear. But it didn't wet itself, and it didn't stop watching. Even shaking, it gave a low growl of defiance at something 10 times its size. Old Son noted that with real surprise. Most dogs pissed themselves at the sight of Green Dragon. This one still had teeth to bear. That, I told him, was exactly why I'd kept it. A black dragon to guard the house, unyielding to the death. A green dragon to clear the trail ahead, one killing strike at a time. Together, I'd have the run of the whole mountain. Old Son laughed at the size of my ambition, then told me the truth. This dog answered to no one but him, and had put 3 holes in him over 3 years of trying. He tossed the key to its chain onto the table between us. If I had the nerve, I could unlock it and lead it out myself. If it went for my throat instead, his rifle wouldn't reach me in time in a room this small. Dying to it would just be dying. I set my knife aside, showing a blade to something like that only tells it you're afraid, and walked toward the corner instead. Green Dragon reared at my approach, chain snapping taut, jaws wide, a stench of rot and blood breathing straight into my face from less than half a meter away. Death range, if it wanted to take it. I offered it my arm instead. Fed it my own wrist, wrapped thick in cotton sleeve, straight into its open mouth. Old Son shouted that I was insane, half rising off the calm. The bite came down exactly as I'd gambled it would, but in the half second before its jaws could fully close and break bone, I drove my arm deeper instead of pulling back, jamming it against the back of its throat. The dog gagged, its killing motion stalled by the obstruction, and in that window I struck, my other hand hooking the loose skin at its neck, my knee driving hard into its soft underside. 100 caddies of wolf dog went down under the impact, and I followed it to the ground, all my weight pinning its throat, both hands locking its windpipe shut even as blood ran freely down my torn arm. It fought, legs tearing the dirt, tail snapping a table leg in half, but I didn't move. Face inches from its own, I watched its wild eyes slowly cloud with the first real fear it had ever shown a human being, watched the fight drain out of its body as the air ran out, until its tail curled between its legs and its throat turned up to me in surrender, the growl in its chest breaking into a whine. I let go, stood, shook the blood off my torn arm, and told it plainly that it had a good bite on it, not a compliment, a statement of ownership. Old Son sat frozen on the Kong, pipe fallen from his hand, forgotten rifle at his side, staring at what he'd just watched. Then he broke into laughter, slapped his knee, called it the gutsiest thing he'd seen in years, and tossed me the key without a second thought. The dog was mine. I bound my bleeding arm, unchained Green Dragon, and it came to my side without a fight, pressed its head low, licked the blood off the back of my hand. Claimed. The black dog at my feet had watched the entire fight, and whatever defiance it had left evaporated on the spot. It understood, in the way animals always understand power, exactly what it had just witnessed. It dragged its broken leg over and pressed itself against my heel, choosing the strongest thing in the room to hide behind. I cut its bindings, looped Old Son's chain around its neck instead, and thanked him properly. Promised the first cut of the next big kill, and meant it. He waved me off, cursing good-naturedly, telling me to get my bleeding self out of his cabin. But I saw the look on his face as I left, the look of a man who'd just found someone worth passing something down to. I walked out of that forest with Green Dragon striding proud at my left side and the black dog limping, tail down, at my right. One fierce, one still learning what it meant to belong to someone, and headed home through the snow, feeling for the first time like the mountain itself might actually belong to me. The whole village had known about my brother's shattered hand and my mother's screaming fit within a day. That kind of thing spreads faster than the wind out here. So by the time I walked back into Kaoshan Tun with Green Dragon at my heel and the black dog dragging behind on a chain, half the village was already gathered under the old scholar tree with their dinner bowls, arguing about whether I'd finally snapped or whether my family had finally driven me to it. Nobody argued once they saw what was walking beside me. Green Dragon moved without a sound, wolf gray and built like something that shouldn't exist this far south, and every dog in the village that usually charged strangers barking took one look and bolted for cover instead, whimpering, refusing to come out no matter how hard their owners kicked at the woodpile. When one loudmouth near the tree made the mistake of muttering that I was still the same spineless coward underneath, Green Dragon simply turned its head, looked at him, and huffed a breath through its nose. The man dropped his bowl, didn't say another word. At home, Lin Xiu had been standing guard at the door all evening with a fire poker, terrified my brothers would come back for revenge while I was gone, more terrified I might not come back at all. When she saw me coming through the snow with what looked like a small wolf on one side and a limping black dog on the other, the poker hit the ground before she did. I told her not to be afraid. Told her these were our new guardians, that one man's fists weren't enough to keep her and Nyonyo safe while I was away, so I'd found help. I called both dogs over and told them plainly, in front of her, this was the lady of the house, second only to me. Anyone who threatened her was to be torn apart. Green Dragon read the situation instantly, caught my scent on her, understood exactly what that meant, sniffed her ankle once, and gave a low, respectful whine. Accepted. The black dog wasn't so cooperative. It had learned to fear me, and it had learned, the hard way, to fear Green Dragon. But Lin Xiu, trembling and clearly harmless, registered in its animal brain as beneath its notice. It didn't growl. It just turned its head away from her with an insulting little huff, presenting her its skull instead of its face. I corrected that on the spot, a slap across the muzzle, hard enough that it yelped, and when it still tried to sulk sideways rather than look at her, I grabbed the loose skin at its neck and forced its head around myself, telling it in no uncertain terms whose hand would be feeding it from now on. Green Dragon added its own opinion, a low, rolling growl that settled the argument for good. The black dog finally lowered itself flat to the ground, gave Lin Xiu one grudging look and a stiff wag of its tail. Submission, if a reluctant kind. I warned Lin Xiu not to trust that submission too far. A dog broken in one evening could remember its old defiance the moment the leash came off, but told her plainly that from now on, anything it did wrong was hers to report and mine to correct. That night, I set the bones in the black dog's broken leg myself, splinted with wood and cloth, the dog silent through the whole procedure except for one full-body shudder. Then I fed both of them a full pot of fox stew mixed with cornmeal, over Lin Xiu's quiet protest that we could barely feed ourselves. I told her the accounting was simple. They were risking their lives for this family, and an animal that's starved half to death won't fight for anyone. That night, for the first time, she slept soundly, and when a shadow lingered near the fence past midnight, one growl from the black dog and a deeper rumble from Green Dragon sent it fleeing without a sound. The next morning, before dawn, I started training in earnest. The black dog, still starving from months of neglect, tried to launch itself at me the moment I approached, thinking my presence meant food. I corrected it with the stick, not the food, the begging, teaching it to sit, to wait, to let a full bowl sit inches from its nose without moving until I gave the word. It tried once to snap at my hand when I reached into its bowl mid-meal, an old survival instinct about protecting what's yours. I overturned the bowl on the spot and told it plainly, nothing in this house was its to guard. Everything came from me and could be taken back just as easily. By the end of the lesson, when I had Nyonyo offer it a candy wrapper by hand, it wouldn't so much as lift its head without checking my face first. Progress, if not yet trust. Then I geared up to go back into the mountains, this time to check on the boar carcass and settle a score with the wolves. I left the black dog, legs still healing, posted at the threshold between the two rooms with clear instructions. Guard the house, guard my wife and daughter, and answer to nothing else until I returned. It understood the tone, if not the words, and dragged itself into position without complaint. Green Dragon I took with me. The boar was gone by the time we reached the ravine. Nothing left but a picked clean skeleton and a mob of crows jeering from the branches. That was the mountain's law. Nothing wasted, nothing left for the slow. I wasn't sorry to see it. The wolves had earned their meal, and I'd gambled and mostly won. What I hadn't expected was Green Dragon going rigid mid-turn, hackles raised, a low pressurized growl coming from somewhere deep in its chest, the kind of warning reserved for something at the very top of the food chain. I found the track myself, low in the snow, small, clawless, nearly weightless. A lynx. The mountain called it Ma Baozi, a name spoken with real dread, because unlike wolves, lynx hunted alone, silent, patient, and vindictive. It would eat your kill and then wait nearby to make you its next meal. We found it in a red pine, 30 meters up, watching us with flat amber eyes. The moment it knew it was spotted, it fled through the canopy, tree to tree, never touching ground, faster than anything with 4 legs on the earth should be able to move. I sent Green Dragon after it and followed at a dead run through knee-deep snow, firing once just to force it down. A shot that clipped the branch beside it and nearly sent it tumbling. But it caught a vine mid-fall and swung itself clear, vanishing behind a thicker trunk. It hadn't run far. It was setting an ambush of its own, waiting for Green Dragon to round that tree and expose its throat. I caught the intent just in time to scream a warning, and Green Dragon, smarter than any ordinary hound, actually obeyed, stopping dead 10 meters short and holding the standoff. The lynx broke first. It came out shrieking, going straight for Green Dragon rather than fleeing. A bid to cripple the more dangerous threat before dealing with me. Green Dragon met the leap head-on, taking the blow on its skull rather than dodging, knocking the lynx out of the air and onto the snow. That half-second of recovery was all I needed. I put a shot straight through its left eye before it could gather itself to strike again. Clean kill, no ruined pelt, no wasted meat, the skull almost entirely intact. A perfect hide. I carried it back to Old Son's cabin, where he took one sniff of the air before I'd even said a word and correctly named it. A lynx, and a big one, purely by scent. He examined the hide with real reverence. Not a single blemish besides the eye, and he told me plainly that hands like mine came from something older than luck. When I mentioned I planned to sell it at the county collection station, he called that a waste, pulled out a fat roll of bills from under his mattress, and offered 250 yuan on the spot, telling me he had a southern buyer coming through in a few days who'd pay top price for pelts this clean, and he'd rather see the money go to me than to the state station's flat rate. I skinned it myself in his cabin that evening, and by the time the hide hung gold and perfect from his rafters, I walked out into the night with 250 yuan against my chest, enough, in that era, to build 3 brick rooms from the ground up. The next morning, I split the money in 2 before doing anything else. Lin Xiu wanted to know why we weren't heading straight to the production brigade office to settle our debt with the accountant, who'd been running his mouth at the well about us mooching off the collective. I told her the accountant could wait. Old man Lu Changshui couldn't. When Nyonyo had nearly died of fever the year before, my own family had treated us like we carried plague. Lu Changshui, no blood relation at all, had handed over his own burial savings without a second thought. That kind of debt gets paid first, and paid with respect. He wasn't happy to see me arrive with gifts, gruffly accusing me of showing off the moment I'd scraped 2 coins together, until I explained the 50 yuan was the loan repaid, earned clean through hunting, and his face finally cracked into something like pride. He took the principal, refused the interest outright, shoved the extra 5 yuan back into my pocket, and told me to spend it on a proper winter coat for Nyonyo instead, warned me he'd have my hide if he ever heard I'd spend it on drink. When I mentioned wanting to rebuild the house, he told me flatly that leaving my mother's household was the smartest thing I'd ever done, and offered to lend a hand with the bricklaying himself. Then I went to settle the face debt. The production brigade accountant, Wang Changgui, who'd spent the morning lecturing the women's director about how families like mine shouldn't expect relief grain after splitting off from the collective. He greeted me with a speech about principles and self-reliance and how young men shouldn't lean on the collective's goodwill, right up until I laid the full repayment, with interest, on his desk. He fumbled, demanded to know where the money came from, warned me gravely against speculation and profiteering as though the accusation alone might make me confess to something. I told him, evenly, that it came from honest hunting, that the mountain fed those willing to work it. He had nothing left to say except one final petty warning about not squandering money on drink and women. The same lecture, recycled, now aimed at nothing. I took my receipt, folded it away, and told him I wouldn't be back to trouble his precious principles again even if I were starving. Then I thanked the women's director and walked out, leaving him gripping his teacup in silence, looking, for the first time since I'd known him, smaller than the desk he sat behind. Outside, the sun was blinding on the snow. 200 yuan still sat warm against my ribs, and every old debt in this life had finally been closed out, one way or another. Next stop, the brick kiln. This family was building the first proper brick house this village had ever seen. From the brigade office, I didn't head home. I went straight to the Red Star Brick Works on the edge of the county town. Out here, most houses were still packed mud, dagai they called it, walls built up in layers and left to dry. A family that could afford stone footings and whitewash counted as somebody. A family that could afford red brick counted as gentry. I laid my money on the sales manager's desk. 5,000 bricks, 10 sacks of cement, 500 caddies of lime. And could the mill's tractor haul it out? I'd pay the transport too. He'd been about to tell me they had no truck free until he saw the stack of bills, and suddenly a driver named Old Zhang was more than happy to run it out that afternoon. By 2 o'clock, the whole village heard it coming before they saw it. A Dongfanghong tractor roaring through the snow, engine growling like some iron beast, its bed stacked high with brick so red it looked like a fire burning against the white ground. Half the village turned out to gawk, following it on foot as it rumbled straight past the center of town and turned, unmistakably, toward the ruined little yard at the west end, my yard. Lin Xiu came out at my shout to find a tractor bed full of brick and cement sitting in front of our door, and the needlework basket in her hands hit the ground before she managed a single word. I told her it was real. Told her, loud enough for every gawking neighbor to hear, that I'd promised her and Nyonyo the warmest house in the village, and that tomorrow we broke ground. Someone in the crowd, half suspicious, half hoping for gossip, asked where a man like me had suddenly come up with that kind of money. I lit a cigarette, offered one to the uncle who'd asked, and told them plainly, I'd bought it with a lynx pelt, taken off a beast that had nearly gutted me for the privilege. Money earned clean, off the mountain, with my own hands. That settled it. A lynx pelt clean enough to fund a brick house. Everyone here knew what that meant, and the suspicion in their faces turned straight to respect. I told them work started the next morning, and that anyone willing to lend a hand would get a yuan a day and 3 meals with real fatty pork at every one of them. Payment on a scale nobody in this village had ever heard offered for day labor. By evening, half the men in Kaoshan had lined up to volunteer. Behind the wall of my old family's house, the mood was rather different. My brother Shanlin lay swollen and stinking on the Kong, the untreated break in his leg starting to fester, begging for a doctor, for even a painkiller from the commune clinic. My mother refused. Every yuan spent on him was a yuan not saved, and her hoarded burial money stayed sewn into her jacket no matter how he screamed. Shanhai, preening at the mirror ahead of his own matchmaking meeting in 3 days' time, refused outright to lend a cent, reminded Shanlin, cruelly, that a man with a ruined leg had no way to ever pay it back. Cornered and desperate, Shanlin threatened to report me to the police himself, to have me arrested for what I'd done to him. Shanhai shut that down fast and hard, not out of any loyalty to me, but because he knew exactly how that story would read to the authorities. Shanlin had broken into my house and attacked my family, and I defended it. Dragging in the police now would only expose him, and worse, threatened to unravel the marriage he was counting on to save his career. My mother, when the argument settled, sided with Shanhai without hesitation. The wedding came first. Shanlin's leg could rot a while longer. The next morning, before the sun had fully cleared the ridge, the smell of my cook fire had already beaten the cold into retreat. I had a full cauldron going, thick-cut fat pork, pickled cabbage, glass noodles, boiling loud enough to be heard down the lane, the smell dragging every man in the village toward my yard on pure animal instinct. I fed them properly. Millet porridge with 2 full ladles of meat each. Told them plainly to eat their fill, or don't blame me for cursing them out later when they had no strength to work. Old man Lou, the same one who'd taken the money from me the day before, though a different Lou than the veteran I'd repaid, practically wept over his bowl, calling it better than New Year's dinner. By midday, the walls had risen to the roof beams, red brick against the gray, mud-walled village around it like a small fire burning in the snow. That's when matchmaker Wang arrived, escorting Lou Milan, the production brigade secretary's daughter from the next village over, all city coat and leather shoes, picking her way through the frozen mud with obvious distaste, with my brother Shanhai trailing behind them, sweating despite the cold. The moment Lou Milan spotted my rising brick house shining in the sun, her whole demeanor changed. She asked if it was Shanhai's, his wedding house. He should have told the truth. Instead, greed and panic together made the choice for him. He claimed it, said he'd spent everything he had to prepare it for her. I was up on the rafters at the time, close enough to hear every word, and I let it run just long enough to be worth interrupting. I flicked my cigarette down, landed neatly at the toe of his polished shoe, and told him, in front of the whole work crew and both his guests, that if he was hunting for a bride, he could keep hunting, but if he was hunting for the outhouse, it was back down the road to the left. That's his real family's house. The crew backed me without hesitation. Old Lou spat and told him flat out whose brick this was, whose meat had fed them all week, and that Shanhai hadn't laid a finger on so much as a mortar joint. The laughter that followed cut deeper than anything I could have said myself. Lou Milan didn't storm off yet. She was sharper than that. She informed Shanhai, coolly, that since this wasn't his house, they'd better go see the real one. Wouldn't do to skip paying respects to his mother. He tried everything to steer her away. She wasn't having it, and neither was the matchmaker, sensing exactly which way this deal was about to break and scrambling to distance herself from it before it did. So they walked the 300 meters to the old house. Lou Milan's fine shoes sinking into frozen mud and manure the whole way, her composure cracking with every step, the stench of the place reaching them long before the door did. And through the paper window, before anyone inside knew they had company, they heard everything. My mother and Shanlin, gloating over the plan in perfect clarity. Get the fool girl through the door, get her pregnant before she could back out, then work her like a servant for the rest of her days, make her clean up after Shanlin, make her pay for every humiliation the family had suffered from me. Shanlin, mid-conversation, punctuated the whole thing with the unmistakable sound and smell of diarrhea, complaining loudly about the strength of whatever remedy he'd been given. Lou Mylan stood frozen outside that door as the full shape of what she'd nearly married into assembled itself in her mind. Not a cherished bride, but livestock being fattened for slaughter. My mother, oblivious, opened the door mid-sentence carrying a chipped basin of waste and found herself staring straight into Lou Mylan's face. What followed wasn't restrained. Lou Mylan spat in Shanhai's face, kicked him bodily into the frozen filth beside the door, and told the whole family, in language sharper than anything a proper young lady was supposed to know, exactly what she thought of being treated like breeding stock. She threw his handkerchief into the slop bucket, promised to have her father look into exactly what kind of official he really was, and swore she'd see him ruined across the whole commune before she walked off with the matchmaker fleeing after her, disavowing the whole family loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. Behind them, up on my rafters, a burst of laughter and applause rolled through my work crew like thunder. Shanhai came apart after that. He kicked the waste basin out of his own mother's hands, screamed that the whole disaster was her fault for talking too loud with the window open, then turned on Shan Lin and beat him with a feather duster for the crime of choosing that exact moment to have diarrhea, as though timing his own suffering had been some deliberate sabotage. When the noise of my house-raising celebration drifted through their window, firecrackers, cheering, someone shouting congratulations over the new roof beam, something in Shanhai finally snapped into something colder and more dangerous than rage. He decided, with the twisted logic of a man who'd lost everything and needed someone else to blame, that none of it was his fault. Not the lie, not his mother's loose tongue, not his brother's timing. It was mine. If I hadn't split the family, hadn't built the house, hadn't been standing there to expose him, none of this would have happened. He worked himself cold with a bucket of well water, and by the time he dried his face, the plan was already forming. He grabbed paper and a cracked fountain pen and told our mother plainly, a farmer didn't come up with several hundred yuan in brick, cement, and daily feasts of meat off a few roe deer pelts. That kind of money meant unexplained wealth, meant speculation, maybe worse, grave robbery, theft of state resources. Who knew? He was going to write a report, take it straight to the county revolutionary committee. And if I went to prison for it, and the house was seized as ill-gotten property, well, as next of kin, who else would inherit it? My mother's eyes lit up at that. My brother, still bleeding from his own mother's negligence, cheered from the calm. The three of them huddled together again, plotting, not to reconcile, but to burn the whole thing down around me if they couldn't have it themselves. None of that mattered much, in the end, next to what happened at the village well the next morning. Matchmaker Wong, desperate to scrub her own reputation clean of the disaster she'd nearly brokered, arrived early with a story already assembled. She told the women gathered there that Lou Mylan hadn't fled over the smell of shit alone. No, a girl raised by a commune secretary had smelled worse and stayed put. What had actually driven her off, Wong confided, voice dropped low for maximum effect, was a smell like rotten seafood fermented for months, like festering flesh trapped inside winter trousers. The unmistakable stench, she said, of a man carrying a shameful disease from his city dalliances. The evidence, as she laid it out, was damning in its own absurd logic. Shanhai buttoned his collar to the chin even in summer heat. Shanhai never swam with the other men. And yesterday's mud-rolling breakdown outside my house. Not distress, relief. Cooling the itch. By the time Shanhai himself walked past the well that morning, pale and hollow-eyed from a sleepless night, the whole crowd scattered from him like he carried plague, someone shrieking that he was leaking poison. A pack of village boys ambushed him next, performing an obscene, gleeful reenactment of the rumor complete with crude rhymes about his rotten trousers, until he broke and fled toward the county road in humiliation, only to be flatly refused a ride by the tractor driver, who cited concern for public health, while announcing the refusal loudly enough for the waiting crowd to enjoy. He walked the whole way to the county seat on foot, choking on tractor exhaust and public ridicule both, while behind him the village loudspeaker crackled to life with old Lou's cheerful announcement that my family was hosting a feast that afternoon to celebrate the new roof beam. Braised pork, stewed intestines, all you can eat. Come one, come all. Look at what an upstanding young man could build with honest work. One brother eating like a king, the other walking into town trailing a rumor he'd never lived down. I'd call that a fair trade. 20 li of frozen road stood between the village and the commune office, and Shanhai crossed every step of it on foot, snow soaking through his shoes, wind stripping the feeling from his face, carried entirely by the fire of revenge burning in his chest. Once he reached the commune gates, he told himself, once that report was in the secretary's hands, everyone would see him as the loyal cadre who'd put duty above blood. That confidence lasted exactly as long as it took the gatekeeper to look him over. Old Zhang, who'd bowed and scraped for a cigarette every time Shanhai passed before, took one look at the mud-caked, hollow-eyed man at the gate and didn't recognize him, or pretended not to. When Shanhai finally got him to admit who he was, the old man's face twisted into something between shock and open contempt. Word had already come down from the office to clear Shanhai's desk for coal storage. Shanhai screamed that it was impossible, that he was properly on staff, that he demanded to see Secretary Liu. Surely there'd been some mistake. Old Zhang wasn't finished with him. He reminded Shanhai, with real relish, exactly how much the secretary had once favored him, introducing his own daughter, no less, and exactly how badly Shanhai had repaid that trust by terrifying the poor girl into tears on their one meeting. The whole commune had heard by now that Liu Milan came home unable to speak straight, flinching at nothing. Was he courting a bride? Old Zhang wondered aloud, or auditioning for a ghost story. Before Shanhai could recover from that, a jeep's horn sounded from deep in the compound. The secretary's own car, plate 001. Old Zhang scrambled to open the gate properly. Shanhai threw himself at it. Literally, dropped to his knees in the snow directly in the jeep's path, forcing an emergency stop mere centimeters from his own body, holding his damp, crumpled report up like a man presenting his last defense before execution. He screamed his accusations at the rolled-up window. Unexplained wealth, speculation, undermining the collective. He was denouncing his own brother out of pure political conscience. He insisted, begging the secretary to just read the letter. The window came down eventually. Secretary Liu Changzheng didn't look at the letter. He looked, briefly, at Shanhai's ruined shoes and reeking jacket, and told him, not with anger, but with something colder, that he'd once believed Shanhai worth investing in, worth introducing to his own daughter. And this was the thanks he got. A man willing to devour his own brother the moment his own schemes collapsed. Someone with that little basic decency wasn't safe to keep on staff. Liu didn't trust what such a man might do to him next. He didn't so much as offer a hand out the window. He simply told old Zhang to keep the gate tighter from now on. No more letting filth wander in. Old Zhang, delighted to have official cover, beat Shanhai back from the gate with a broom as the jeep pulled away, calling him worthless, a waste of every chance he'd ever been given. The report, the one thing Shanhai had spent all night writing, ended up trampled into pulp under old Zhang's boot in the mud. Sitting in the snow outside a gate that had just slammed shut on the only life he'd known, Shanhai found he had no tears left. In the village, he was the man with the rotten crotch who'd made a girl scream. At the office, he was the fool who'd terrified a bride into a nervous breakdown. And in his own twisted arithmetic, none of it, not one part of it, was his own doing. He staggered up, retrieved the pulped remains of his letter, and swore, in a voice gone half feral, that if the commune wouldn't listen, he'd take it to the county. If the county wouldn't listen, the city. He would not let a jumped-up mountain peasant win. He turned and started walking, dragging a leg that seemed to have actually gone lame from the cold, toward the county seat, further away, deeper into the storm. Back at the new house, the night was warm as spring despite the blizzard outside. The build was finished, red brick, red tile, glass windows polished clear, a fresh Kong radiating heat through fragrant new pine boards. Not just a house, a monument to everything I'd rebuilt. Lin Xiu sat cross-legged on the Kong that night, turning our little tin money box upside down and counting out what was left, a handful of coins on the new mat, 3 yuan and change after everything we'd spent. And still she was smiling, delighted with every coin as though it were a fortune, marveling that even with almost nothing left, she felt more secure than she ever had holding real money back at the old house, where the wind through the paper window had kept her anxious no matter what she owned. I watched her count, watched the light in her face, and then I looked at her hands. 24 years old, and those hands looked 20 years older. Cracked black across the knuckles, joints swollen from years of hard labor, frostbite, sores still raw from washing dishes in ice water. Against the bright new mat beneath her, they looked like a wound. I took her wrist before I even decided to. She flinched, embarrassed, tried to pull the hand back into her sleeve, apologizing for how ugly it looked, saying she hadn't had time to put ointment on yet. That flinch broke something open in me. I held on tighter instead of letting go, and before I knew it, I was crying. Really crying, tears falling straight onto the backs of her ruined hands, asking her how this had happened, how the soft hands she'd had when she married me had turned into this in only a few years of following me. She didn't pull away again. She turned her hand in mine instead, wiped my face with her thumb, and told me, half laughing through her own tears, that every farmer's wife had rough hands, that this wasn't suffering, not compared to what we'd already survived. We had a brick house now, a warm bed, no mother-in-law screaming at her. That was already more than most women got. Then she told me what she actually wanted, eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in her in either lifetime. To see Tiananmen someday. To stand in front of Chairman Mao's portrait, just once. She said her hands could stay rough as they liked if she got that one trip. I promised her. Sleeper car, the whole way. A photo studio, dressed in her best, once we got there. The next morning, the storm had cleared, and I woke early with that promise still burning in my chest. Money for New Year's. Money for Beijing. I went back to the old lean-to at my mother's house, quietly, to a hidden compartment I'd built into a cabinet years ago, and pulled out an oilcloth bundle I'd kept sealed since before winter set in. 2 sable pelts. Dark brown shot through with violet, shifting gold under lamplight, the kind of fur that looks alive. I'd taken 4 days and nights in a snow den to get them, before this life started over. In my old life, they'd been meant to pay for my sister Xiaoyu's university tuition after our mother refused to fund it. I didn't need that debt anymore. I had a better use for them now. Old Son's dugout cabin, deep in the pines, greeted me with laughter I didn't expect. Big, booming, half in Russian. Inside, alongside a plate of hand-torn mutton and a graveyard of empty bottles, sat a barrel-chested foreigner with wild blonde hair and a heavy beard, drinking rice liquor straight from a tin mug and slapping his own knee between toasts. Old Son introduced him as Ivan Ivanov, an old contact from his border trading days, ostensibly some kind of trade inspector, though Old Son called him a smuggler to his face without any offense taken. His truck had broken down nearby, and his nose, apparently, had led him straight to the smell of Old Son's liquor. Ivan greeted me with a drunken slur of broken Chinese, eyes glassy. Except they weren't, not quite. Underneath the performance, I recognized the sharp, sober calculation of a man taking my measure. This, I understood immediately, was this southern buyer Old Son had mentioned, someone with a channel into the black market that ran straight across the border, trading scarce goods for the kind of hard-to-get materials that flowed the other way. I sat down calmly, stamped the snow off my boots, and took the seat at the foot of the Kong without waiting to be invited. Old Son, gauging my composure with approval, mentioned casually that I was the one who'd taken the links he'd been admiring earlier. Ivan's drunken swaying stopped instantly. He set down his mug, looked me over properly for the first time, and gave me a genuine thumbs up before sliding back into his loose, unbothered act, never once bringing up business directly. I didn't play along with the small talk either. I reached into my coat, drew out the oilcloth bundle, and set it down on the table between us without a word. The 2 sable pelts sat there under the lamplight, dark and shimmering, and Ivan's hand hovered an inch above them, trembling, not quite daring to touch. The reverence of a man who understood exactly what he was looking at. Sable that rare came around once every few years, even in the far eastern forests back home. But he was a trader first. Within half a minute, the awe had folded itself away, replaced by a practiced, oily calculation. He offered 500 yuan, generous, he implied, purely as a favor to Old Son. I didn't move. I lit a cigarette instead, took my time with it, and told him, evenly, like discussing the weather, that 500 was an insult, the kind of price you'd pay for rabbit fur, not for pelts this rare. I told him plainly what a pelt of this quality would open at a Leningrad auction house, and what it would be worth traded quietly to some general's wife in Moscow with a taste for furs, worth a car permit, a rail car of steel, easily. The mention of Leningrad hit him like a slap. His mug came down hard enough to spill, and the drunk act dropped entirely. He wanted to know, with real alarm now. Who I was. How a farmer in the middle of nowhere knew how black market fur moved through Soviet high society. The suspicion turned dangerous fast. His hand drifted toward his belt. In an era this politically fraught, a foreigner spooked into thinking he'd stumbled into a setup wasn't going to negotiate. He was going to disappear, or worse. It was old son who broke the standoff. Not with words at first, just the deliberate tap of his pipe against his boot heel, loud enough to cut the tension. He asked Ivan, without looking at either of us, whether in 2 or 3 years of dealing together, he'd ever once been shorted or cheated. Ivan, some of the rigidity leaving his shoulders, admitted he hadn't. That old son was the most trustworthy man he knew in this business. That was all the opening old son needed. He told Ivan plainly that I was the boy he'd raised, that I'd taken both the lynx and these sables myself, and that his own knees were too old now for the deep taiga. From here forward, he said, pointing his pipe straight at me, anyone dealing in this territory dealt with me. Trust me, he said, the way you trust him. It was as close to a formal handover of a lifetime's reputation as I was ever likely to witness. One old master passing his standing in the trade to the next. Ivan's suspicion evaporated on the spot, replaced by something like delight. A supplier this connected, this capable, vouched for personally by a man he'd trusted for years. That was worth more to him than the pelts themselves. He shook my hand hard enough to nearly dislocate it, apologized for the insulting first offer, and asked what I actually wanted. Rubles, dollars, car permits, even gold, he claimed he could get. I turned all of it down, told him plainly what I wanted instead, a coupon for a Butterfly brand sewing machine, a coupon for a Phoenix bicycle, a coupon for a transistor radio, and 300 yuan cash for New Year's supplies for my wife and daughter. He stared at me like I'd spoken in tongues, expected a hard bargain to gouge him for everything the market would bear, and instead got a shopping list for a modest household. I told him plainly, I wasn't in this for the big trade. I was a farmer who wanted his family fed and warm for the new year. He could keep his fortune, I'd keep mine, smaller and closer to home. He didn't argue twice. Out came the coupons, stamped and colorful, followed by a thick stack of cash he didn't bother counting. 500 yuan, he said. Keep the change, call it thanks for the drink, and for old son's liquor besides. I tucked the coupons and the cash against my chest. The sewing machine, the bicycle, the radio Lin Xiu had wanted for years without ever asking outright, and felt, for the first time since waking up in this life, something in my chest finally settle into place. Before I left, I bowed properly to old son, still smoking silently on the Kong, and told him there were no words big enough for what he'd just done for me. That once the New Year's shopping was done, Lin Xiu and I would come back with good food and good drink to see the holiday in with him. He waved me off with his pipe, not turning around, and grunted a single word that was supposed to sound like an insult and came out, through the smoke, sounding a good deal warmer than that. The old scholar tree at the village entrance had become my mother's stage that morning. A knot of bundled women and idle men gathered close, half frozen and eager for gossip, and she was performing for them like a woman with nothing to lose. Word had gotten around that Shanghai hadn't come home since his commune visit, and the rumor mill said exactly what had actually happened. He'd been thrown out like a stray dog. My mother had a different story ready. He'd been noticed by important people, she claimed, seconded to the provincial capital on urgent state business. Too important a man now for a small commune office to hold. Any day now he'd come rolling back in a proper government jeep. Nobody believed her. Nobody dared say so either. My mother's temper was well known enough that challenging her wasn't worth the trouble. Buoyed by the silence, she turned her venom on me instead, the ungrateful eldest son who'd split from the family and deserved whatever bad luck found him. When someone mentioned my new brick house looked rather grand, she scoffed that it was empty theater, that I'd spent every yuan I had and gone into debt for the glass alone, that she'd heard Lin Xiu crying the night before about not being able to afford dumpling wrappers for New Year's. Just wait, she told them. By New Year's Eve, my family would be begging at her door for scraps, and she wouldn't spare so much as dishwater for us. She never got to finish that sentence. A burst of radio static cut through the cold air first. Too loud, too clear, to be some pocket transistor. More like the village loudspeaker had come loose and gone wandering. Then a voice, gravelly and theatrical, rolled out over the wind. narrating some old adventure serial at full volume, and every head at the well turned toward the sound. I came around the bend on a brand new Phoenix bicycle, polished black, riding tall in a proper sheepskin coat, a string of firecrackers swinging from one handlebar, and two net bags loaded with canned peaches, malted milk powder, and good liquor swinging from the other. The radio itself sat lashed to the crossbar, antenna extended, blasting the story straight into the frozen morning air. Behind me came a hired donkey cart, piled high, and at the crown of that pile, half covered by a red cloth the wind kept lifting, sat the unmistakable black and gold shape of a butterfly sewing machine. Beside it, sacks of fine white flour, a full side of pork with 3 fingers of fat, a bolt of bright red cloth. I rang the bell once, and the sound cut through the crowd like a slap. I didn't stop, didn't so much as glance at my mother standing frozen beneath the tree, her face draining white as the cart passed. The radio, at that exact moment, hit the punchline of its story, something about fortune turning over every 30 years, about never underestimating a poor young man. And I rode straight through the middle of the crowd's stunned silence and on toward home, leaving the smell of good pork and the sound of my own laughter trailing behind me. Someone finally found their voice behind me, asking my mother, none too gently, whether that side of pork looked like a family that couldn't afford dumpling wrappers. My mother's legs gave out from under her, and she sat down hard in the snow. Back at the house, Lin Xiu had spent the morning turning 3 yuan and change over in her hands, worrying about New Year's cloth for Nyonyo, about the empty-handed visit to her own family that was coming, about whether we'd even manage dumplings this year. Nyonyo kept asking when we'd get to hear firecrackers like the neighbor boy's family. Then the radio hit the wall of the house before I did, and Lin Xiu came to the door to find the whole cart's worth of goods waiting in the yard, the sewing machine she'd stared at through shop windows for years without ever daring to touch, the pork, the cloth, the radio still crowing away on the handlebar. She nearly went down at the sight of it. I carried the sewing machine in myself, put Nyonyo up on my shoulders first for good measure, and spent the next 20 minutes handing armload after armload through the door while Lin Xiu stood there directing traffic like she was dreaming. When I finally pulled the firecrackers out for Nyonyo, she screamed with pure joy loud enough to shake the rafters. Once the house was full, really full, warm and stocked and loud with radio music, I handed Lin Xiu the rest of the cash and told her it was hers to spend however she liked, that we weren't short on money anymore. She cried, not from grief this time, but from the sheer release of a woman who'd spent her whole life afraid of poverty, finally allowed to stop being afraid. That evening, with the smell of braised pork and glass noodles filling the house, someone pounded on the gate hard enough to rattle the frame. Lin Xiu's face went pale immediately. She was certain it was my mother, come to make a scene over the smell of meat drifting through the whole village. I thought the same, and went out prepared to send my own family packing again. Instead, I opened the gate to find 3 strangers shivering in the cold, noses twitching at the smell of dinner. Lin Xiu's own father, mother, and younger brother. Lin DePeo, blustering and entitled from the first word, immediately demanded to know why his own daughter hadn't invited them over to share in the good fortune. Her brother, Lin Chong, tried to shove past me into the house before I'd even finished the greeting, drooling openly at the smell of meat. I let the mother in first, gently, warmly, genuinely glad to see her. In my old life, she'd been the one who'd secretly slipped Lin Xiu boiled eggs and her own hidden savings when everyone else turned their backs. That debt I remembered. Her husband and son I let cool their heels at the threshold, made them stamp the snow off their boots before setting foot on Lin Xiu's freshly cleaned Kong mat. A small thing, but it told them plainly whose house this was. Once inside, the mother pulled Lin Xiu aside and pressed a bundle of 20 eggs and hand-stitched shoe soles into her hands, apologizing that it wasn't much, clearly terrified her husband would see. Lin Xiu nearly cried at the sight of it. Meanwhile, her brother made himself entirely at home, didn't bother removing his shoes properly, planted himself in the seat of honor, and started shoveling fatty pork into his own bowl with no regard for anyone else at the table, grease running down his chin. Her father's eyes, meanwhile, never left the sewing machine sitting by the window, sizing it up like something already his. He got to the point over a cup of liquor. His younger son needed a match set of 3 rotations and a radio, the standard bride price items, for an upcoming match, and this sewing machine would do nicely. He announced, not asked, that they'd be taking it with them after dinner. Lin Chong backed him up loudly, adding that he'd take the radio too while they were at it, since it was his sister's family, and he wouldn't feel awkward about it. The room went silent. Lin Xiao's mother stared at her lap, too frightened to speak, tugging uselessly at her husband's sleeve before he kicked her hand away. I told them plainly, the meat, they could eat their fill of. Everything else in this house stayed. That set both of them off, Lin DePeo pounding the table, reminding me loudly that without him there'd have been no marriage at all, demanding I show his son some family loyalty. Lin Chong standing on the Kong edge and announcing he was taking the sewing machine regardless, calling it a loan, while making no pretense of asking permission. When he actually reached for it, Lin Xiao, trembling, terrified, but unable to stop herself, slid off the Kong and threw her thin body between him and the machine, begging in a voice barely above a whisper not to take the one thing that might make a proper dress for their daughter. Her brother shoved past that plea entirely, raised a hand to push her aside outright, and found his wrist caught in my grip before the motion finished. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. He yelped, bent double at the pressure, and I released him with enough force to send him stumbling into the wall. Then I turned my back on both of them entirely, settled Lin Xiao back onto the Kong, wiped her tears myself, and told her quietly that I had this. Only then did I draw the skinning knife from my belt, the one I used for field dressing game, and bring it down once, clean, through a heavy pork leg bone sitting at the table's edge. The crack of it silenced the room completely. I told them plainly, scraping meat shavings off the blade without looking up, the sewing machine was for my wife. Everything in this house had been paid for with real risk, out in the deep mountains, and if either of them thought their bones were harder than that pork bone, they were welcome to test the theory. That ended it. Lin DePeo, red-faced and humiliated but unwilling to press further, declared loudly that we'd grown too proud for family and that they were leaving, dragging his wife out behind him when she hesitated too long looking back at her daughter, kicking her hand away from the doorframe when she tried to linger. The gate slammed. The bloodsuckers were gone, leaving only the radio still crackling through its story in the sudden quiet. Lin Xiao broke down once they'd gone, not with relief, but guilt, certain her mother would catch worse than usual once she got home for having lingered too long, for having eaten nothing while everyone else did. I held her and told her the truth. As long as her father and brother controlled what her mother was allowed to keep, nothing we gave the old woman would ever survive the walk home. Better to wait. Once the new year settled and the house was properly established, I'd find a way to bring her mother out here alone, without those two vultures hovering, and let her eat well and rest properly for once, the way real filial care should look. Lin Xiao finally nodded, the first real light coming back into her tear-streaked eyes. The 29th of the 12th month, right after Little New Year, and the whole village smelled of gossip instead of festivity. Inside our house, none of that mattered. The sewing machine hummed its steady rhythm, Lin Xiao's foot working the pedal while red-flowered cloth flowed under the needle. A new cotton coat for Nyonyo, stuffed soft with fresh-carded wool. Nyonyo sucked on a piece of candy, watching her mother work with pure contentment. I sat cleaning my rifle with an oiled deerskin, half listening to Lin Xiao worry about the shadows lingering outside our gate all morning. Zhao Shanlin, apparently, pretending to pass by with a look on his face that unsettled her. I told her not to mind them, just jealousy with nowhere to go. Outside, the jealousy had organized itself into something uglier. A knot of villagers had gathered against our outer wall, waiting for a show, and at the center of it, for once united against a common target, stood my mother and Lin Xiao's father, Lin DePeo, sworn enemies turned temporary allies. My mother spun theories about ill-gotten wealth loud enough for the whole crowd to hear. Lin DePeo claimed he'd seen the village security officer on a suspicious phone call to the commune, hinting darkly that an arrest was coming, that everything we owned would be seized. The crowd's mood turned gleeful with anticipation. Lin Chong was already planning which item he'd steal for himself in the confusion. That's when a Jeep engine tore through the winter silence, a military green 212, plowing snow in a reckless arc straight toward our gate. In a village this remote, in this era, a Jeep meant one thing only: the authorities coming to arrest someone. My mother nearly danced with joy. Lin DePeo backed up out of splash range, but kept his greedy eyes locked on our closed gate. The Jeep braked hard right at our door, and what climbed out wasn't a policeman at all, but a heavy-set, sweating man in an army coat over a white shirt, who abandoned the car door entirely and came stumbling through the snow, shouting my name like I was his own grandfather come to save him. Song Weigwa, procurement chief for the county state restaurant. He explained it all in a rush, breathless, terrified I'd refuse him. Foreign guests arriving that evening for an official dinner, the signature dish, hazel grouse soup, a northeastern delicacy, ruined when a new kitchen hand accidentally killed and plucked the live birds meant for it before anyone could stop him, leaving them useless for the freshness the dish required. Without a replacement, heads would roll, careers would end. The whole restaurant's reputation would collapse in front of provincial dignitaries. Chef Lu Changchun himself, Song said, had sent him, insisted there was only one man in the region who could pull this off, the same man who'd once pinned a half-mad guard dog barehanded in his own kitchen. That story had apparently made me something of a local legend among the restaurant staff. He shoved a stack of ration coupons into my hands before I'd even agreed. 50 caddies of grain coupons, 10 of meat, 2 industrial coupons, and promised exclusive supplier status with the state restaurant if I pulled this off. I called for the black dog, told Lin Xiu to fetch my net, and watched the crowd outside go pale as Green Dragon padded out first, massive, wolf-eyed, silent, before the black dog came bounding after it, delighted to be chosen, practically climbing into the Jeep in its excitement, while Green Dragon simply settled itself across our doorway like a guardian statue, daring anyone in that crowd to test whether it meant business. Nobody did. The Jeep died at the mouth of Ghost's Despair Gully, buried too deep for the tires to manage further. Song Weigwa stepped out into knee-deep snow and nearly retreated back into the cab entirely, teeth chattering, questioning whether anything could survive out here, let alone be caught alive. I told him the mountain would come to me, not the other way around, and set off on foot with the black dog ranging ahead. All its earlier playfulness gone the instant its paws hit real snow, transformed into something focused and silent, nose working the wind like radar. A quarter hour in, it froze at the edge of a stand of birch, one paw raised, body rigid, staring up into the canopy. I signaled Song to silence and followed its line of sight to spot what looked like clusters of gray-brown lumps high in the branches. Hazel grouse, 4 of them, plump and glossy, exactly what we needed. Shooting them was out of the question. The noise would scatter the rest, and a bullet wound would drain the freshness the dish depended on. Instead, I unrolled the weighted net I carried for exactly this purpose, read the wind, and waited for a gust strong enough to keep the birds gripping their perches rather than watching the ground. When it came, I spun with it, released the net in a curling arc that threaded around the dead branches in its path, and dropped it clean over all 4 birds at once, bringing them down tangled and squawking, but very much alive. Song's jaw actually dropped. He called it magic, more than once, entirely sincere. I wasn't finished. The black dog had been circling one particular gully the whole walk, whining low, and I led us to a patch of ice gone faintly yellow from a hidden hot spring beneath, thin enough to break with a rifle butt. Underneath, packed into the mud, dozens of northeastern forest frogs lay dormant, plump-bellied with fat. Song took one look and called them toads, disgusted, until I split one open to show him the translucent, fat-rich gland inside. Snow toad oil, the delicacy Cantonese businessmen in particular prized as soft gold. The kind of restorative luxury that would elevate a meal from merely fresh to genuinely impressive. Exactly the kind of dish, I told him, to serve alongside the grouse soup if he wanted to truly win over a discerning guest. Song dropped to his knees in the snow at the words soft gold, pulled off his own coat to use as a makeshift sack, and began scooping frogs into it with both hands, all dignity forgotten. Back at the state restaurant, the kitchen was one step from open panic. The Hong Kong businessman, Mr. Jean, courting for a lucrative goods contract, had thrown down his chopsticks over a dry, freezer-burnt chicken dish and threatened to leave on the next train if the promised wild game centerpiece didn't materialize. Chef Lu Changchun sat frozen with despair while his deputy, a smug man named Ma San, suggested simply frying up another old frozen chicken under enough chili to mask the taste and calling it done. I kicked the kitchen door open before that plan could go any further, dismissed the frozen chicken as an insult to the guest's intelligence, and dumped the sack onto the prep table. For live hazel grouse, glossy feathered and thrashing with vitality, clucking indignantly under the kitchen lights. Lu Changchun very nearly wept at the sight of them, calling them the finest specimens he'd seen all winter. Ma San's earlier scorn dissolved into stunned silence. I wasn't finished there either. I opened Song's makeshift sack of frogs next, over Ma San's disgusted protest that I was trying to sabotage the meal with a bucket of toads, and cut one open in front of the whole kitchen to show them the pale, glistening oil inside. Explained plainly that a Cantonese guest raised on the philosophy of food as medicine would recognize this instantly as the delicacy it was. That pairing the grouse soup's freshness with the frog oil's restorative luxury would elevate the whole meal from merely good to unforgettable. Lu Changchun took the frog in both hands like a family heirloom and told me, with real reverence, that I understood not just hunting but people, that he was thoroughly won over. Crisis solved, and turned into a triumph besides. I stopped Song before he could rush off to spread the good news and told him plainly what I wanted in return, not commendations, not a banner on the wall, nothing that couldn't feed a family. 50 caddies of premium white flour, 10 caddies of pork belly, 2 tins of cooking oil, 2 cans of malted milk powder, and, remembering Lin Xiu still in her patched old coat, several feet of good red dacron cloth for a new dress for my wife, plus 2 caddies of white rabbit candy for my daughter. Under any other circumstances, demanding this much from a state restaurant would have gotten me thrown out on my ear. Song didn't hesitate for a second, waved his staff toward the storeroom, told them to hold nothing back, put it all on his own account. Within minutes, sacks of fine flour, glistening cuts of pork, colorful candy, and good cloth were piled in front of me like a small mountain. This era's version of true wealth. Whatever became of the Hong Kong businessman's contract, whatever Song's career gained from tonight, none of it mattered half as much as this. My wife and daughter would eat well and dress warm and hold their heads up doing it. That was worth more than any banner the state could offer. I thanked Song, asked him to help load the Jeep, and told him plainly, my family was waiting for me to come home for the new year. By the time the Jeep pulled up to our gate, half the village had gathered to watch. The pile of goods beside it caught the low sun, that half side of pale, fatty pork drawing every eye in the crowd. My mother and Lin Xiu's father, of all people, ended up standing shoulder to shoulder blocking our door. 2 sworn enemies suddenly in perfect agreement. My mother was still too stunned by the sight of it all to move. Lin DePeo recovered faster. I watched his throat work as he stared at the sack of fine flour and that pork, greed plain on his face, and he shot a look at his son. Lin Chong was 20 that year, big-boned, useless, spoiled rotten. The signal was all he needed. Brother-in-law, you're finally back. He was already reaching for the pork as he said it. This is good and fat. We've got no meat for New Year's. I'll just carry this home. Let your mother-in-law stew it up for us. His grimy hand went for the meat like it already belonged to him. In his mind, Lin Xiu had only ever been a resource to draw from, and anything in her household was his by extension. I caught his wrist before he touched it and slapped the back of his hand hard enough to raise a welt. He howled, clutching it, staring at me in disbelief. Zhao Shana, you'd hit me? I'm your wife's own brother. What's wrong with eating a little of your meat? Brother-in-law, I said cold. The day Lin Xiu nearly died in a hard labor, I begged you to run to the clinic for a doctor. Where were you? Home in bed. Said it was too cold to go out. When she couldn't nurse afterward and nearly starved, I came to your house to borrow 2 eggs. You told me a married daughter was water thrown out the door. None of your concern anymore. Now you smell meat, and suddenly remember you're my brother-in-law. I didn't say it loud, but every word landed like a nail, on his face, and in the ears of everyone watching. The crowd turned on them fast, muttering about shamelessness, about ignoring a daughter until she was worth something. Lin DePeo's face went through several colors before he found his footing again. He knocked his pipe against the ground, drew himself up with all the authority of an elder, and pointed at me. Zhao Shana, is that how you speak to your betters? No parent is ever wholly in the wrong. What's past is past. Now that you've come into money, honoring your father-in-law is only right. Since when does a son-in-law feast while his wife's own father goes hungry? Then he rounded on Lin Xiu directly. And you, hiding back there, tell your husband to carry that meat to my house. I raised you for nothing, you ungrateful thing. He knew exactly what he was doing, aiming at her instead of me. Years of beaten-in obedience meant one hard look from him usually did the job. Lin Xiao, holding Nyonyo, was shaking. Old instinct, nothing she could help. But this time, instead of bowing her head the way she always had, she lifted it. Her voice trembled, but it held. Father, Shanha earned this meat with his own life, up in the mountains. It didn't blow in on the wind. She went on, steadier now. A married woman follows her husband's house. I belong to the Zhao family now. What happens to these things is his decision. That nearly choked Lin DePeo on the spot. Insolent. The nerve, his hand came up to strike her. I stepped in front of it before it landed, and whatever he saw in my face made him snatch the hand back on his own. Lin DePeo, I'll say this once. I gestured at the whole loaded jeep, loud enough for the entire crowd to hear. This meat, this flour, this candy, it's for my wife and my daughter. Outsiders don't get so much as the smell of it. Don't lecture me about filial duty. Whatever we owed each other ended the day you sold your own daughter for a bride price. Stay away from my door from now on, and if you ever raise a hand to my wife again, I'll break your other leg to match. I turned my back on the lot of them and called to Song Weigua. Brother Song, help me carry this inside. Dumplings and stewed pork tonight. You got it. Song, thoroughly entertained by the whole show, hefted a sack of flour and followed me in without a second glance at the family still standing there. The gate slammed shut, sealing Lin DePeo, Lin Chong, and my mother, who never did get a word in, out in the cold together. The wind howled outside. Inside, before long, a smell drifted out that could crack a starving man's resolve. Pork rendering down in hot oil, scallions hitting the pan, dumplings going into boiling water. Lin Chong's stomach growled loud enough to embarrass him. He swallowed, staring at the shut gate, looking close to tears. Pa, I want meat. Meat, meat, that's all you ever think about. Go home and drink your cornmeal gruel. Lin DePeo kicked his son out of pure frustration, and every burst of laughter drifting from inside the wall landed on him like a slap. He knew, standing there, that the era of pushing his daughter around like a soft persimmon was well and truly over. My mother lingered a moment longer, glaring at the shut gate, muttering under her breath about how they could eat themselves sick for all she cared. Wait until Shanlin's leg healed, but she never finished the sentence. A growl from Green Dragon inside the yard sent her scurrying back with the rest. That night, the new house blazed with light and laughter. That night, half of Kaoshan Tun lay awake smelling meat they'd never taste, and in two houses especially, the Lin household and the old Zhao homestead. Nobody slept at all. Chapter 40. Morning came with the smell of cornmeal porridge and pickled vegetables drifting through our little yard. Simple food, but with last night's dumplings still sitting warm in everyone's stomach, Lin Xiao looked healthier than she had in weeks. Wiping rice off Nyonyo's chin, the three of us settled into something like peace. That peace didn't survive the pounding that hit our door next. Not knocking, kicking, hard enough to threaten the frame. Open up. Open this door. Co-op inspection team. Open it, or we break it down. Lin Xiao's bowl hit the floor and shattered. Her face went white. Husband. That's director's son. He hates it when people trade privately. He's here to make an example of us. I caught her hand before she could reach for the broken pieces and steadied her with a squeeze. Don't move. It's fine. I'm here. I walked out at my own pace and pulled the bolt. The door hadn't opened a hand's width before it was shoved wide enough to stagger me. Leading the charge was son Dana, director of the Kaoshan Tun Co-op, slick back hair, a proper mouse suit, for militiamen behind him with old rifles and red armbands, all of them wearing the look of wolves that had just found an open pen. Director's son, showing up with troops this early, planning a bandit sweep? I leaned against the doorframe, not moving aside, watching him with something that wasn't quite a smile. Don't get smart with me. Son's small, greedy eyes swept the yard and locked onto the half-eaten frozen pork on the windowsill, then the sacks of flour piled in the corner. Greed flickered across his face before he swapped it for official menace, jabbing a finger at me. Zhao Shanha, someone's reported you for speculation, illegally trading state-controlled goods. A layabout like you, not doing collective work. Where would you get money for white flour and pork? It's not honest money. He waved his men forward. What are you standing there for? Search the place. Anything of unclear origin gets confiscated for the collective. Cuff this speculator. Yes, sir. The militiamen surged toward the house like starving wolves, and one of them shoved Lin Xiao, still holding Nyonyo, out of the way. Move. Don't block us. She stumbled, nearly fell, and Nyonyo started wailing. You want to die, I said, and something in me went white hot. I closed the distance in one step, caught the man's wrist, and twisted. He screamed, his rifle nearly hitting the ground, and in the same breath I shouted, Black Dragon, Green Dragon. Anyone touches my wife or my daughter, tear his throat out. Both dogs came out of hiding like they'd been waiting for exactly those words. Green Dragon especially, the size of a young calf, planted itself in front of son Dana, fangs bared, throat rumbling low enough to feel through the ground. One word from me, and it would have gone straight for his neck without hesitation. Son's legs nearly gave out. Whatever bluster he'd walked in with cracked in half. Zhao Shana. You'd set dogs on us. That's violent resistance to the law. I'll have the police put a bullet in you, you'll see. Son Dana. Listen carefully. I pointed at everything filling the yard, voice cold as iron. This is payment from the county state restaurant. Procurement Chief Song Weigwa delivered it himself. You want to rob me under cover of law? Try it and see what it costs you. Want me arrested? Get a proper warrant from the county first. Song Weigwa's name gave him pause, but his eyes drifted back to the pork and greed won out again. Song wasn't here now, no witness to contradict him. Grab it first, sort out the rest later. Nonsense. Don't hide behind some big shot's name. I say you stole it. Son, red-faced with humiliated fury, drew the pistol at his belt and leveled it at me. Kill the dogs. I don't care whose they are. We stood there, one wrong move from bloodshed, when a horn blared from the village entrance, the sound of salvation itself. The familiar 212 Jeep came roaring up, braking hard behind the crowd, spraying Sun with snow. Song Weigwa was out of the cab before it fully stopped, sweating, stumbling toward us. Stop. Everybody stop. Whoever touches brother, Zhao answers to me. Sun's face changed the instant he registered Song, and changed further when he saw who climbed out behind him. An older man in a black wool coat and gold-rimmed glasses, 2 bodyguards flanking him. Someone important, clearly. Sun's fat face melted into a fawning smile. Ah, Chief Song. A misunderstanding, all a misunderstanding, just a routine inspection. Song ignored him entirely, shoved past the militiamen blocking the path, and grabbed my arm, voice raw with urgency. Brother Zhao, help me. Something huge has happened. That's when the man in the wool coat stepped forward. His eyes were red. He'd clearly been crying, and there was something close to pleading in the way he looked at me. Mr. Zhao, I'm Jean Wanfu. Your snow-toad soup last night was extraordinary. But I received an urgent call from Hong Kong before dawn. My father has suffered a stroke. Only the gallbladder of a wild iron-backed bear can serve as the medicinal lead ingredient to keep him alive. He had his bodyguard open the case in his hands. The crowd gasped as one. Inside sat stack after stack of crisp new yuan, and even more eye-catching, colorful foreign exchange certificates. 10,000 yuan here, plus 5,000 in exchange certificates, Jean Wanfu said, his voice shaking. Whoever brings me that bear's gallbladder, this is the deposit alone. Succeed, and I'll add an imported truck, and I'll personally petition the county to name you an official trade consultant. The crowd exploded. 10,000 yuan. 20 years of a worker's wages, sitting right there in the snow. Never mind the certificates and the truck on top of it. Son Dana's eyes went red with greed, all his fear forgotten along with the dogs still standing guard. Before I could say a word, he shoved forward, thumping his own chest. Mr. Jean, the co-op takes this job. He turned, sneering at me. Don't let this one fool you, Mr. Jean. He's just a layabout who got lucky with a few birds. Hunting a bear? An iron-backed bear? That's a job that gets men killed. The co-op has a proper militia hunting team. 6 rifles, experienced men. Nobody else in 10 villages could pull this off. Jean Wanfu hesitated. He needed certainty, and 6 armed men did look more reliable than 1 man alone. I lit a cigarette, unhurried, and said, cold, Son Dana, go ahead and get yourself killed. I won't stop you. An iron-backed bear's near enough a mountain spirit. Hide too thick for bullets, and starving mad this deep into winter. Bring a crowd making noise like that, and you're just delivering dessert. Bullshit. Son rounded on me, spitting mad. Don't think I don't see through you, Zhao Shanha. You just want the whole reward to yourself. Trying to scare the rest of us off so you can collect a loan. Mountain spirit, my ass. It's an animal, and I've got guns. I don't believe 6 rifles can't put it down. He turned back to Jean Wanfu, all smiles again. Mr. Jean, time's against you. Your father can't wait. This one's too much of a coward to commit anyway. Give the job to me. I'll have the gallbladder in your hands by tomorrow. Jean Wanfu genuinely couldn't afford to wait. Saving a life was like fighting a fire. He looked between us and made his choice. Very well, director's son, I'm counting on you. But he was a careful businessman, and he turned back to me for insurance. Mr. Zhao, since you know this work, would you come along too, as a guide, or in case director's son's team runs into trouble? The reward stands regardless of who succeeds. Son, unable to object without risking the whole deal, forced a mocking laugh. Fine, let him tag along. Let him see what a real hunting team looks like. Just don't wet yourself and make us carry you back, Zhao Shanha. You can carry the rations for my dogs, since you're so fond of them. He led his militiamen off, laughing loudly, full of himself. I watched them go, then looked at Jean Wanfu's anxious face. I didn't argue, didn't get angry. I just took a long drag on my cigarette, something cold and sharp settling behind my eyes. Fine, I'll come. I went back inside, picked up my hunting knife freshly honed, and told Lin Xiu quietly, put water on to boil. That's for washing the gallbladder, once I bring it home. Chapter 41. Deep in the greater Xing'an Range, old Black Mountain, true wilderness, ancient trees, snow past the waist, wind screaming through the branches like something dying. Sun Dana and his militia led the way, swaggering when they set out. 2 hours in, every one of them had shrunk into their own collar. Sun, wrapped thick in his army coat, still felt the cold working straight into his bones, nose running, eyebrows frosted white. Each step a struggle, like pulling turnips from frozen ground. Damn this godforsaken cold. He turned to vent his temper and found me trailing at the rear, hands behind my back, walking easy, my boots skating light over snow that had his men floundering, Black Dragon and Green Dragon ranging beside me, noses testing the wind. Seeing how relaxed I looked only made him angrier. Zhao Shanha, hanging back that far, scared already? Speak up if you want to quit, kneel down and beg, and I'll send you home right now. His men laughed along. Right, what good are dogs anyway? When the bear shows up, it's real guns that matter. I ignored the fools. I'd already read the clawed bark and the size of the tracks in the snow, and I knew exactly what waited ahead. I stopped, leaned against a tree, patted Black Dragon's head, and lit a cigarette at my leisure. I'm done walking. Find the rest of the trail yourselves. Coward, Sun spat. Come on, men, once we've got the gallbladder, he doesn't get so much as a taste of the soup. A few hundred meters on, a sharp-eyed militiaman shouted and pointed. In a sheltered hollow stood a massive dead red pine, a black hole gaping beneath its roots, bleached bones scattered around it, the air thick with a stench that turned the stomach. The den. Found it. Sun's face flushed with excitement, greed swallowing whatever fear he had left, the 10,000 yuan and the imported truck practically waving at him already. Spread out. Rifles up. He arranged his 5 men in a half-circle, muzzles trained on the black opening. One older, more experienced militiaman hesitated. Director, should we call Zhao Shanha up first, just in case this thing's too much for us? Call him for what? So he can split the money? Sun glared him down. It's hibernating, dead to the world. 6 rifles, 1 shot each, will blow it to pieces. On my signal, fire. Flush it out. Bang, bang, bang. A ragged volley tore into the hollow, bark and splinters flying, the shots cracking through the silent valley loud enough to shake snow from every branch nearby. It wasn't gunfire. It was a knock on death's own door. Roar. A roar like something from the underworld tore the dead hollow open. It's coming out. Fire. Fire. Sun's hand shook so badly, he nearly dropped his own pistol. Through the settling dust came a shape the size of a small hill. A bear standing 3 meters tall, coat bristling like steel wire, a streak of silver fur running its spine, catching the light like polished metal. The legendary iron-backed bear. Woken mid-hibernation by a hail of bullets, it was in the foulest possible mood, small red eyes locked on the 2-legged creatures in front of it, jaws dripping with rank saliva. Bang, bang. The militiamen fired again in their panic. The round struck its resin and grit-armored back and rang off like coins against metal, sparks flying. Not one round penetrated. Mother of God. Bulletproof. It's a monster. The men who'd been bragging minutes before dropped their rifles and bolted. Not that anyone outran a bear through deep snow. The bear reared up and charged like a tank. One backhand swipe sent a slow militiaman flying 7 or 8 meters into a tree trunk, knocked cold on impact. Help! Help! The rest scattered in raw terror. Sun tried to run too, but his own weight betrayed him. One turn, and he went down face first in the snow, scrambling on all fours like an overturned turtle. Don't eat me. The bear was on him in seconds, its shadow swallowing the daylight, its stinking breath hitting him full in the face. He tried to rise and caught his foot on a root, sprawling again, and by the time he rolled over, that dripping maw already hung directly above his head. There was nothing animal left in those small red eyes, only something cruel and almost human, savoring the moment. It raised one massive paw, wide as a millstone, and brought it down towards Sun's skull with a sound like tearing wind. Sun's bladder gave out on the spot, soaking his pants through. Grandfather Zhao, save me. Just as Sun braced for the paw that would turn him to pulp. Black dragon low, green dragon, the neck. The command cut through the storm, calm and merciless. Both dogs shot forward like arrows loosed from a bow. Black dragon, cunning as ever, slid low between the bear's legs and struck at its most vulnerable point. The bear roared in pain, its swing thrown off by inches, its paw crashing into the frozen ground beside Sun's head instead of through it. Earth and rock exploded outward, showering Sun, nearly stopping his heart from the shock alone. While the bear twisted to deal with the dog at its flank, a shape dropped from the rise above like a hawk stooping on a rabbit. I came down with my knife already drawn, using the fall's momentum, aiming not for brute force, but for the one soft spot a turning bear exposes, the armpit. Break for me. I drove the blade in with everything I had, but the beast was too cunning. As if it had eyes in the back of its skull, it twisted at the last instant and took the strike on its iron-hard spine instead. The knife rang off resin-caked hide thick as armor, the shock numbing my grip clean through, the blade sinking barely half an inch before catching fast. Not good, I thought. This thing's hide was tougher than I'd reckoned. Roar! It reacted with terrifying speed, backhanding a blow toward me that would have taken my head clean off if it connected. I let go of the knife and rolled with the momentum, snow exploding where I'd stood a heartbeat before, the paw tearing straight through to bare black earth beneath. I sprang back up, snatched Sun's dropped pistol off the ground, useless against that hide, but better than empty hands, and faced the bear alone. It seemed to sense, finally, that this two-legged thing was different from the rest. It didn't charge again. Instead, it reared onto its hind legs, beating its own chest like war drums, breath steaming white from its jaws. It was gathering itself and issuing a challenge. I flexed my numbed right hand, my eyes harder than they'd ever been. I glanced at Sun, still a heap of ruined nerve on the ground, and said, cold, get clear if you don't want to die. This thing's no ordinary animal. The wind and snow howled harder. The real fight was only just beginning. The storm raged harder, as if trying to bury what was about to happen. I held the pistol I'd taken off Sun Dana, cold sweat filling my palm. My first strike had failed, and I'd lost whatever advantage surprise had given me. Facing a bear this enraged head-on was suicide. Black dragon, green dragon, circle it, wear it down, don't take it head-on. I backed away, shouting the command. However thick its hide, the bear's sheer mass made it slow to turn. My two dogs became something it couldn't shake, darting in to rip at its haunches and back legs, biting and retreating, never staying to fight. Roar! Harassed past reason, the bear thrashed its huge paws, shredding the brush around it to ribbons, but couldn't land a hit on either dog. Bang! Bang! I fired twice, aiming not for its body but for its nose and eyes. The storm was too fierce, the bear thrashing too wildly. The shots grazed its ear, clipping off nothing but a tuft of fur. That gave my position away completely. The bear's head snapped toward me, something cunning flashing in its small red eyes. It abandoned the dogs entirely, dropped to all fours, and charged, a runaway armored vehicle bearing straight down on me. Its speed was wrong for something that size. Utterly wrong. I bolted through the snow, trying to use the trees for cover. But the bear didn't bother going around them. It simply plowed through, trunks as thick as a bowl snapping like straw in its path. The distance closed fast. 30 meters. 20. 10. Woof! Green dragon, frantic to protect me, threw itself forward and clamped its jaws onto the bear's ear, trying to drag it back. Green dragon, let go! I screamed, my eyes nearly tearing. Too late. The bear roared in pain and whipped its head, flinging Green Dragon aside like a rag doll. Crack! It slammed into an old pine, howling in agony, and dropped into the snow, unable to rise, coughing up a mouthful of blood. With nothing left to slow it, the bear closed the last distance in an instant. It reared up, both massive forepaws rising with a stench of rot behind them, ready to bring them down on my skull. One solid hit, and I'd be paced. I had nowhere left to run. My back had already hit a boulder. In that final second, the fear in me vanished entirely, replaced by something colder and wilder at once. I didn't dodge. I did the one thing that made no sense at all. I went forward, not back. I dropped low, curled tight, and slid across the ice, straight between the bear's own legs. Its paws crashed into the rock behind me, sending stone fragments flying. And now I was directly beneath its belly. No armor plating here. But this alone wouldn't kill it. I didn't reach for the knife, too short to reach anything vital. I raised the pistol instead, and waited, missing its strike. Sensing the enemy beneath it, the bear roared and dropped its head, jaws wide enough to crack a cow's femur, driving down at me with everything it had. That was the true abyss, the stench overwhelming, its fangs filling my vision. Now, the instant its mouth closed to within 10 centimeters of my face, its saliva already dripping onto my skin, I didn't hesitate. I rammed the pistol barrel straight into its open mouth, deep into the roof of its throat. Die! I pulled the trigger. Bang! 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 I emptied the entire magazine in one motion. The shots came out muffled because they were detonating inside living flesh. No hide to stop them this time. The rounds punched straight through the roof of its mouth and tore through its brain, turning that massive skull into ruin. Ugh! The bear went rigid. The light drained out of its small red eyes, replaced by ash-gray stillness. Its enormous body came down like a collapsing mountain. Oof! I ended up pinned under several hundred caddies of dead bear, nearly having my last meal forced back up, but I was laughing anyway. Coughing blood and laughing at the same time. Ha! Ha! You damn animal. Nothing beats a gun after all. Behind a distant tree, son Dana peered out, shaking, his own frozen urine crusted stiff against his leg. He stared at the motionless bear, then at me climbing out from under the carcass, drenched in blood I couldn't tell was mine or the bear's. I must have looked like a ghost, hair wild, face streaked with gore, my sheepskin coat torn to ribbons. But I still had the empty pistol gripped tight in one hand, and something in my eyes that made him sit back down hard in the snow. He'd met plenty of hard men in his life. Never one this reckless with his own death. I ignored him entirely. First thing I did was crawl to Green Dragon, gathering the injured dog into my arms. Thank God, a few cracked ribs, but its eyes opened, and it managed to lick my hand once. Good dog. Still alive, that's what matters. Once Green Dragon was settled, I turned to the carcass, drew my hunting knife, and opened the belly with practiced hands. Among the tangle of organs, I found what I was looking for, a dark green gallbladder, glowing in eerie gold where the light caught it. The golden gallbladder. This bear had lived 50 years at least, feeding on rare herbs and mountain treasures its whole life to produce something this priceless. I washed it clean with snow and tucked it into the pouch against my chest. Turning to son Dana, still shaking on the ground, I lifted the empty pistol toward him. Thanks for the loan. Director Sunday wouldn't have killed it without your gun. Let's go. Back to the village. Mr. Jin's waiting on his father's life. Son stared at my blood-streaked grin and shuddered violently. He understood, in that moment, that something in Kaoshan Tun had changed for good. By the time we reached the village entrance, it was already afternoon. The storm briefly lulled, though the cold had only deepened. Jin Wanfu hadn't gone back to the guest house. He stood beside the jeep, checking his gold Rolex every few minutes, face pale with worry. Less than 20 hours remained before the doctor's deadline. Even a flight back to Hong Kong tomorrow wouldn't save his father if we came back empty-handed today. Mr. Jin, perhaps you should wait inside. It's too cold out here, Song Wei suggested. No. Jean shook his head, voice hoarse. I'll wait right here. I can't face my father without the medicine. A crowd of villagers had gathered, murmuring among themselves. Her director's son took the militia up after that bear. That's a death sentence. An ironback bear's practically a mountain spirit, and Zhao Shanhe went with them. I'd bet neither of them comes back whole. Then someone sharp-eyed spotted movement on the distant white road. They're back. Someone's coming. Jin Wanfu shoved past his own bodyguards to meet them, stumbling through the snow. The first to appear were militiamen in full retreat, coats torn by branches, some having thrown their rifles away entirely, looking like men who'd crawled straight out of hell. Then came Sundana. The once proud co-op director was a wreck, hat gone, hair a bird's nest, coat caked in mud and pine needles, walking with an obvious limp, the front of his trousers frozen stiff and reeking. Last of all came a man drenched in blood. My sheepskin coat had gone dark red, blood mixed with gore until it was impossible to tell which was mine. My face was the same. Only my eyes, unnaturally bright, showed clearly. I carried Green Dragon, wounded, in my arms, the empty pistol slung at my hip, walking with the steady gait of something that had just walked out of a slaughterhouse. The whole crowd fell dead silent. Director's son, Song ventured. At the sound of a human voice, Son's legs gave out entirely, and he collapsed into the snow, sobbing. It was horrible. A monster. That thing was a real monster. Jin Wanfu ignored him completely, rushing to me instead, his eyes fixed on the bulging pouch at my chest, voice shaking beyond control. Mr. Zhao, how did it go? I stopped, handed the injured green dragon to Lin Xiao, who'd come running, and gave her a look meant to reassure her. Then I turned to Jin Wanfu and slowly reached into the pouch. Every breath in the crowd stopped. I drew my hand out. Resting in my palm sat a gallbladder the size of a fist, catching the evening light in dark green shot through with gold. Mission accomplished, I said plain. 30 years on this bear. A golden gallbladder. Jin Wanfu, a Hong Kong businessman worth millions, dropped to his knees right there in the snow in front of the entire village at the sight of it. Mr. Jin. His bodyguards lunged to help him up. Don't touch me, he snapped, tears streaming freely as he took the gallbladder in both trembling hands like he was cradling his own father's life. He bowed his head to me deep. Mr. Zhao, you're my family's benefactor. Without this, my father would surely have died. I, Jin Wanfu, will never forget this debt. The whole village stood stunned. A wealthy Hong Kong magnate, a man who rode cars and lived in mansions, kneeling to Zhao Shanhe? I stayed calm, helping him to his feet. Mr. Jin, you honor me too much. I took your money, I do the job. This was a fair trade. Trade, and a promise. Jin wiped his eyes and immediately took the leather case from his bodyguard, pressing it into my arms. Mr. Zhao, this is the 15,000 yuan deposit in full. As for the imported truck, the moment I'm back in Hong Kong, I'll arrange shipment. It'll reach the county within half a month. I took the case and passed it straight back to Lin Xiao, who stood there stunned, holding a small fortune like she was still dreaming. The money in the truck are the small matter, I said, watching Jin Wanfu carefully. Mr. Jin, the other thing we agreed on? Right here, already prepared. Jin drew a folded document from his coat's inner pocket and handed it over with both hands. A red letterhead document, stamped in bright vermilion, carrying the joint authority of the County Revolutionary Committee and the Foreign Trade Bureau. I opened it and read. Approval regarding the appointment of Comrade Zhao Shanhe as Special Procurement Officer of the County Foreign Trade Bureau and the establishment of a designated purchasing station in Kaohsiung. Not just paper, a sort of authority. With this, buying and selling mountain goods was no longer something I did on the side. It was state-sanctioned business, earning foreign exchange for the country, untouchable by anyone. Satisfied, I folded it away and turned to Sundana, still collapsed in the snow. He'd already lost whatever hope remained, staring at the case of money, the golden gallbladder, and the way I looked down at him now. Director Sunday. I pulled the red document back out and tapped it lightly against his fat, terrified face. Open your eyes and read carefully. This is a county directive. From today, all trade in mountain goods through Kaohsiung runs through me. This is earning foreign exchange for the nation. This is a special procurement officer. Whatever charge of speculation you had in mind for me, you can wear that hat yourself now. Sun shuddered at the sight of the seal, his face gone the color of ash. He knew it was over. The co-op's monopoly on this region had ended for good. One more thing. I pocketed the document, stepped back, and waved a hand in front of my nose. Go home and change your pants. That smells fouling the whole village. The crowd finally broke, roaring with laughter. Humiliated past bearing, Sun scrambled up and fled through the crowd, limping, covering his face, gone like a dog with its tail between its legs. Standing there in the sunset, a fortune in cash behind me, my wife and daughter beside me, that red-sealed document in hand. I was, in that moment, undisputed king of this stretch of black earth. Our little yard blazed with light that night. The big cauldron was boiling, but not with pork tonight, with chunks of bear meat, gamey and rich, the finest tonic food any mountain family could ask for. On the warm Kong, Green Dragon lay in the best spot, wrapped in bandages Lin Xiu had torn from the new floral cloth, boiled first for cleanliness. The wound looked ugly, but no tendons or bones were damaged, just blood loss leaving it weak. I sat at the Kang's edge with a full bowl, fresh bear meat, unsalted, dogs shouldn't have too much salt, stewed soft. Here, old friend. You earned this with your life. I fished out a glistening piece with my chopsticks, blew it cool, and fed it straight to Green Dragon's mouth. It sniffed, lifted its head with effort, and swallowed. Husband, that's bear meat, Lin Xiu said, watching, not objecting exactly, but clearly pained by the waste. People barely got meat some years, let alone game this rare. Sold at market, that bowl alone could have bought sacks of cornmeal. So what if it's bear meat? I said, not looking up, spearing another piece. If not for Green Dragon today, your husband would be a bloodstain in the snow right now. Bear meat, dragon meat, it can have whatever it wants. From now on, Green Dragon and Black Dragon are heroes of this house. They eat well. They eat the best. Whatever reluctance Lin Xiu had melted away at that, replaced by something like pride in her husband's loyalty. She ladled out a bowl for Black Dragon too, who, unharmed but thoroughly exhausted, had been watching with hopeful eyes the whole time. That night, the smell of meat drifted the length of the village, and half of Kaoshan Tun lay awake in their beds, tossing and turning. Compare yourself to your neighbor and you'll die of shame. Look at Zhao Shana's family, even the dogs eating bear meat, while everyone else gnawed cornbread. The next morning, before full light, I was already up. Instead of heading into the mountains, I found a smooth wooden board, a brush, and ink. I had bigger business to attend to. What are you writing, husband? Lin Xiu asked, Nyunyo on her hip. I wrote in bold, sure strokes across the board. County Foreign Trade Bureau Special Designation. Kaoshan Tun Mountain Goods Purchasing Station. Then I pinned the red-sealed document beneath it, wrapped in cellophane against the weather. Xiu'er, open the gate. I carried the board out and mounted it above our doorway on a ladder. The villagers, heading out with their hoes for the morning's work, spotted it and swarmed over immediately. A purchasing station? Zhao Shana, you're opening a shop. Look at that document. A real red seal. From the county. A few who could read gasped aloud. Special procurement officer. My God, Zhao Shana's a state cadre now. I stood on the step in my clean sheepskin coat, lit a cigarette, and addressed the gathering crowd. Folks, listen up. Used to be, whatever you brought down from the mountain. Pelts, herbs. You had to haul it to the co-op and take whatever director's son felt like offering that day. Bad mood, low price. Good mood, still not much. And half the time, an IOU instead of cash. Murmurs of agreement rippled through. Everyone here had suffered under Sun's thumb one way or another. From today, no more of that. I pointed at the sign overhead. This is officially open for business. Pelts, herbs, game, mushrooms, fungus, hazelnuts. Anything the mountain gives, I'll buy it. 10% above co-op rates. And most important, I pulled a fresh stack of bills from my pocket, slapping them into my palm. No IOUs. Goods in one hand, cash in the other. The crowd exploded. 10% higher and real cash? In an era where the co-op paid out in matches and salt half the time, real money was everything. Shanha, you mean it? An old man pushed forward, excited. I've got 2 fox pelts from last year. Co-op only offered 5 yuan, said the color was off. You'll take them. I'll take them, I said, waving him forward. Uncle Lou, last year's pelts, right? Bring them now. No moth damage. I'll give you 6. Cash on the spot. I'm going right now. Old Lou dropped his pipe and ran home. I've got dried mushrooms. I've got deer antler. Within minutes, my front door had become the busiest market in the village. Meanwhile, across the village, son Dana sat behind his empty co-op counter, bruised and swollen, listening to the commotion outside, staring at his own deserted storefront. He hurled his teacup to the floor. Rebellion, open rebellion. He touched the confession letter he'd just finished writing in his pocket, thought of the monster he'd seen the day before, and couldn't bring himself to curse aloud even once. He knew. The tide had turned for good. Kaoshan Tun belonged to Zhao Shana now. By afternoon, the crowd at our gates still hadn't thinned. While villagers lined up to sell their goods, my mother and Shanlin crouched suspiciously behind the millstone at the back of the crowd. Shanlin clutched a cloth bundle, swallowing nervously. Ma, are we really not going up ourselves? That's 100 yuan sitting right there. Go yourself, why don't you? Are you simple? My mother pinched him hard. That ungrateful wretch hates us to the bone now. If we go up, he won't buy from us. Might even set the dogs on us. Then, what do we do? See that one? She nodded toward a familiar layabout nearby. Zhao lazy, chewing on a stalk of grass, watching everyone else get paid with obvious envy, too lazy to have gathered any goods of his own. Get him over here, my mother said, smiling something ugly. 2 yuan for his trouble. Tell him to sell it as his own. Once he's got the cash, we split it after. A few minutes later, Lazy swaggered through the crowd, dropped a bundle onto my table with a flourish. Make way, I've got the real goods. Zhao, boss Zhao, come take a look at this treasure. I glanced at him, a small-time thief, nothing more, but a man doesn't turn away customers on opening day. Open it. He unwrapped it with a flourish, and a fiery red fox pelt spilled out across the table, glowing like flame in the evening light, flawless from nose to tail. The crowd gasped. A fire fox. That's a lucky omen. Co-op's best pelt looks like a rag next to this. Lazy preened at the praise. How about it, boss Zhao? Took me 3 days and nights in the deep mountains to get this. Give me a fair price, 100 yuan, not a fun less. I studied the pelt, not rushing. My fingers traced down to the head, stopping at the left eye, a pinhole-sized bullet wound. Familiar. Too familiar. My mouth curled cold. You shot this? Of course. Who else? His eyes flickered, but he pressed on. My aim's excellent. Excellent aim? I slammed the table. Lazy, you don't even own a proper rifle. You can't hit a pheasant most days. You expect me to believe you took down a fox this cunning. And this skinning technique, the cut hidden inside the lip, that's Kaoshan Tun's own old hunter method. You know that trick? Lazy went pale, sweat pouring. I just got lucky. Lucky. I wasn't wasting more breath on him. I snatched up the pelt, pointed to the tiny bullet wound, and addressed the whole crowd. Folks, I know this pelt. I shot this 3 years ago, on the 8th of the 12th month, atop Old Black Mountain. To keep the hide perfect, I put a bullet through its left eye from 100 meters out. I brought it home, hadn't even sold it yet, when it went missing. I was told rats had chewed it up and it got thrown out. I fixed her lazy with a look sharp as a blade. So that rat was you? You had the nerve to steal from my own house. The mood shifted instantly. Speculation was one thing. Theft meant public denunciation, maybe prison. Lazy's legs went weak, especially watching Black Dragon rise and bare its teeth, a low growl building. It wasn't me. I didn't steal it. Panicking to save himself, he spun and pointed straight at the millstone behind the crowd. It was your mother. And Shanlin. They gave it to me. Said you'd taken it years ago and they'd hidden it away. Now that you're paying top price, they were too ashamed to sell it themselves, so they hired me to do it. Take it up with them. The whole crowd erupted, every eye swinging toward the 2 figures hiding by the millstone. Good God, that's shameless. Lied to their own son that it was ruined, and kept it all this time? And now that he's made money, they use his own property to cheat him again? Are these even people? My mother and Shanlin tried to flee, but found themselves boxed in by an angry crowd. I walked toward my mother, the red fox pelt still in hand. Mother, quite the scheme. My voice gave nothing away, which somehow made it worse. 3 years ago, I wanted to sell this to buy medicine for Shior. You swore up and down it was lost. Turns out it's been sitting at the bottom of your trunk this whole time. You think I'm a fool? Or that heaven doesn't see? My mother's face flushed dark, still trying to bluster. That, that was before you split from the family. Everything then belonged to the household. I'm your mother. I was just holding it for you. What's wrong with that? Holding it for me. I laughed coldly. Fine. Since you were holding it for me, it's coming back to its rightful owner now. I rolled up the pelt and handed it to Lin Xiu behind me. As for payment, I looked at her lazy's expectant face and my mother's greedy one, and pulled a single fin coin from my pocket, flicking it into the air. It arced down and landed in the mud at my mother's feet. This fun is your safekeeping fee and his running fee. Take it and get out. Try bringing filth like this to my door again, and I won't extend you any more courtesy. I'll send you straight to the police. The crowd roared its approval. Serves them right. That's how you deal with bloodsuckers. My mother stared at the coin in the dirt, then at the contempt on every face around her, and knew her name was mud in this village for good. She burst into tears, too ashamed even to pick up the coin, and dragged the equally humiliated Shanlin out through the crowd. Erlazy tried to slip away too, but I called him back. Erlazy, remember this. Help them pull a stunt like this again, and I'll show you what it means for a hunting rifle to have no eyes. Yes, yes, never again. He fled, tripping over himself. Once the whole mess was settled, the sky had gone fully dark. I shook out the recovered firefox pelt and draped it gently around Lin Xiu's neck. Against her pale face, that fiery fur was breathtaking. Xiu'er, this is what I owed you, all those years ago. Today it comes home. She touched the warm fur, eyes reddening, and nodded firmly. Let's go home, husband. I'll make you dumplings. Good. Home. I had Song Weigua's accountant settle the books and lock away the case of cash. The gate creaked shut behind us, sealing out the wind and the day's chaos. That night, for our family, was one of reunion, of vindication. But nobody noticed that as the night deepened, the howling wind and snow, which had raged all day, fell strangely, eerily silent. Night settled thick as spilled ink. Our new house's Kong burned hot. Lin Xiu had long since fallen asleep with Nuno in her arms, a smile still on her lips, worn out from a day of counting money, happy in a way that made for deep, easy sleep. I wasn't asleep. I sat cross-legged on a chair in the outer room, an oiled cloth in hand, cleaning the pistol again and again by the weak light of an oil lamp. Outside in the yard sat the day's goods, the enormous bear hide, and a basin of unprocessed, blood-slicked bare bones I hadn't gotten around to yet. The air still hung thick with the smell of blood. Wine. Green Dragon, resting by the door to heal, gave a low, strained sound. It struggled to lift its head, the broken leg still aching, nostrils working hard, catching a scent that clearly troubled it deeply. Black Dragon woke beside it. Its fur stood on end instantly, and it shrank behind Green Dragon like something trying to hide, tail clamped tight, trembling. Something's wrong. I froze, then blew out the oil lamp at once. The room dropped into total darkness. As a hunter twice over in this life, my instincts ran sharper than any animal's. Beneath the smell of bare blood, something else had crept into the air, a rank, foul odor. The smell of creatures that never bathe, mixed with rot and urine. I pulled on my boots, took up the rifle, and crept to the window without a sound. I didn't open the door. I leaned close to the glass instead, thick with frost, and pressed a warm fingertip against it, melting a coin-sized hole to peer through. I narrowed one eye and looked out. What I saw made even a man who'd lived 2 lifetimes go cold to the scalp. Along the low wall outside, on the distant woodpile, further still along the snowy road, pairs of small green lanterns flickered in the dark. 1 pair, 2, 5, 10. As far as I could see, they were everywhere. 30, 40 pairs at least. No sound at all. Like ghosts from hell, crouched silently in the snow, every one of them fixed on our yard. And every gaze converged on the same spot, the pile of bare bones and hides sitting in the center of the yard. What burned in those green eyes wasn't ordinary hunger. It was the desperation of creatures that hadn't tasted meat in lifetimes, driven half-mad by the smell of the richest blood they'd ever encountered. Damn it, the white plague wolves. I sucked in a breath, understanding it all at once. Days of heavy snow, the true white disaster of legend. Every rabbit and roe deer outside had frozen or been buried too deep to find. The wolf packs had run dry of food and gone half-mad with starvation. And the overpowering reek of bear blood pouring off our yard was a beacon in the dark for exactly those animals. An ironback bear was near enough a mountain spirit. Its flesh and blood carried power beyond ordinary prey. These creatures had smelled it and come to fight for it, whatever the cost. This wasn't a stray wolf or two. This many, gathered in one place. This had to be several mountains worth of packs, driven together by desperation. "Husband, what's wrong?" Lin Xiu's voice came, groggy, from the inner room. "Don't make a sound. Hold Nuno tight. Don't get off the bed. Bar the door." I kept my voice low, but let every ounce of urgency through. Lin Xiu woke fully at the tone alone. She'd never heard me speak like that, and clamped a hand over Nuno's mouth, curling under the quilt, trembling. I took a breath, tucked the pistol into my belt, and picked up the rifle. I knew I couldn't let the pack strike first. If 40 starving, red-eyed wolves came over that wall, not even the 2 dogs could hold them back. Nothing short of a miracle could protect my wife and daughter. I had to hold the line at the wall. I had to wake the whole village. I threw the door open and strode into the yard. The wind hit me full force, carrying that rank stench thicker than ever. The green eyes along the wall, seeing a man emerge, didn't flee. They lowered as one, hackles rising, a low growl building before the charge. Bang! I raised the rifle and fired straight into the sky. The crack of it tore the dead silence apart, shaking snow loose from every branch, breaking that deathly standoff wide open. Then I filled my lungs and roared loud enough to wake the dead. Nobody sleeps tonight. The wolves are here. Sound the gongs. Get your guns. 100 wolves on the village. Anyone who wants to live, get up now. That single gunshot cracked the frozen night wide open, and my voice went with it, tearing through the wind into every window in the village. Nobody sleeps tonight. The wolves are here. 100 of them on the village. Anyone who wants to live gets up now. For 2 seconds, dead silence. Then Kaoshan Tun exploded into chaos. The alarm bell at the village head clanged in a frantic, uneven rhythm, and every household added its own noise. Basins, pot lids, children crying, women screaming, all of it tangled together into panic. Someone flung a door open, took one look outside, and sat straight down in the snow. No moon that night, but the snow threw enough light back to show what waited beyond every low wall, every woodpile, even up on the rooftops, pair after pair of green eyes. Glowing in the dark, not making a sound beyond a rasping breath and the scrape of claws on frozen ground. Being watched by that many eyes at once was enough to freeze anyone from the scalp down. Fear spread like plague. Villagers who'd argued with me over pennies just hours earlier were now diving for root cellars, barring doors with shaking hands, some too panicked to even get their trousers on. Across the village, Sundana huddled under his own counter clutching the pistol he only ever carried for show, wetting himself again at the sound of the howling outside, and cursed my name in the dark, blamed me entirely for dragging that bear carcass back into the village, and calling every starving wolf for 3 mountains around straight to our door. He prayed, with real venom, that the wolves would go for my family's meat and leave him alone. Not everyone was that much of a coward. In the face of real danger, people instinctively look for the strongest thing nearby to shelter behind, and in Kaoshan Tun that night, there was only one candidate. Someone shouted to head for my house, that I had a gun and high walls, and a dozen or so of the braver men and militia members converged on my yard with whatever they could grab, old muskets, hunting spears, even a butcher's knife. My yard had become the epicenter of it all, the smell of bear meat and bones still thick in the air, driving the wolves outside half-mad with hunger. I stood on top of the wall, coat open, pistol raised, steady as a post. When one starving wolf broke early and leapt for the wall, I dropped it clean out of the air with a single shot before it landed, but the blood only sharpened the pack's frenzy rather than scaring it off. Lin Xiu stood in the doorway holding Nuno, pale but silent, biting her lip rather than crying. I told her plainly to get inside and bar the door, not to open it for anyone unless she heard my voice specifically. Green Dragon, leg broken but teeth intact, would guard them inside. Black Dragon stayed with me at the wall. She nodded hard, wrapped the fox pelt tight around Nuno, and went in. The bolt fell into place, and one weight lifted off my chest. Then came shouting at the gate. The militia leader Urga and a dozen villagers, chased in by wolves that had already broken through their own defenses. I couldn't afford to shut them out. If the village's nerve broke entirely, we were all finished. I ordered the gate opened. Black Dragon tore into a lone wolf trying to slip through in the confusion and flung it clear, buying the villagers time to scramble inside before we sealed the gate again. Once inside, looking at me on the wall and the dead wolf on the ground, the terrified men finally broke down. Urga could barely work the bolt on his own rifle, hands shaking, guessing 30 or 40 wolves out there from what he'd glimpsed. I kicked him lightly to snap him out of it and told the crowd plainly. This was the White Plague. These animals were starving mad, and if they couldn't get in, they'd die anyway. Tonight it was them or us. Anyone who wanted to live would follow my orders. That settled something in the group. I laid out the defense fast, put our best marksman, Old Man Lou, on the roof with my rifle to pick off the lead wolf or whoever ran point. Had Urga and a few armed men hold the front wall, conserving bullets for when the wolves actually leapt. Had everyone else stack the yard's firewood against the wall and set it burning, since wolves feared fire and a wall of flame would light the whole yard bright as day. The fire caught fast, driving back the nearest wolves and lighting up the snarling faces pressed against the wall beyond, dozens of them, gaunt, yellow-fanged, drooling. Then, from somewhere in the dark, a long, terrible howl, the pack leader's signal. The wolves went still, dropped low, and gathered themselves to charge. I told Black Dragon it was time to eat, and a dozen shapes came hurtling straight through the flames toward the wall. Fire roared as the wind caught it, and still a dozen starving wolves forced themselves through the burning line, scorched fur and all. I emptied the pistol point blank into the first wave, dropping 3 before they even landed, but there was no stopping what came behind them. They trampled their own dead and poured into the yard. Urga's musket fired once before a huge male wolf knocked him flat, jaws going for his throat. He threw his arm up just in time to catch the bite instead, and I couldn't reload fast enough to help. So I jumped down off the wall with the knife instead, driving it hilt deep into that wolf's spine on the way down. Black Dragon hit it from the side a heartbeat later and snapped its neck outright. The yard turned into chaos, shouting, wolves howling, the scrape and thud of spears and shovels. Old Man Lou, steady on the roof, dropped a wolf with every shot. I was everywhere at once, blood-soaked, throwing myself at whatever threat came closest. Then, while everyone's attention stayed locked on the fighting at the front wall, a lean, cunning old wolf slipped around the chaos entirely, working its way through the shadow of the woodpile toward the one door with no man guarding it. The room where Lin Xiao and Yunyo waited. It reared up, forced the unlatched window open with its own weight, and shoved its head and shoulders through. Lin Xiao's scream tore through the yard, Yunyo wailing behind it. I spun toward the sound, but 3 wolves had me pinned, and I couldn't break free. That's when Green Dragon, legs still splinted, still bleeding, dragged itself up from where it had been resting and threw its whole body at the wolf's midsection like a battering ram, unable to bite properly with its leg ruined, using pure mass instead. The impact knocked the wolf clean back out through the window into the yard, but Green Dragon came out with it, tumbling hard enough to tear the wound open further, blood soaking into the snow. The old wolf recovered first, saw a crippled dog barely able to stand, and lunged for the kill. Green Dragon didn't dodge, didn't want to. It planted itself under that window with nothing left in its eyes but resolve. I told it to guard this house, and it would guard this house until it died doing it. The wolf's jaws closed on its shoulder, tearing flesh, and Green Dragon didn't make a sound. It used the opening instead, twisted its head around, and locked its own jaws onto the wolf's throat, and didn't let go no matter how the thing thrashed. I broke free at the cost of a wolf's claws raking my back open, killed the thing behind me with a backhand thrust, and reached the window in time to drive my knife into the base of the intruding wolf's skull. It went rigid and stopped moving. Green Dragon still hadn't released its grip, eyes glazing, body shuddering from blood loss and pain, jaw locked in place out of pure will. I dropped the knife and knelt in the snow, throat tight, running a shaking hand over its bloodied head, telling it to let go, that it was over, that Lin Xiao was safe. At the sound of my voice, the rigid body finally eased. It released its bite, lifted its head with visible effort to look once at the mother and child through the window, then at me, gave a weak sweep of its tail against the snow, and let out the faintest whine. For a moment, the fighting around us seemed to stop entirely. Every man in that yard, wolf-blooded and battle-hardened as they'd become in the last hour, looked at that dog and found themselves close to tears. I stood up slowly. Whatever softness had been in me a moment before was gone, replaced by something colder than the storm itself. Kill the rest of them, I told Black Dragon. Then I went back in. I didn't spare a thought for my own wounds after that. Knife in one hand, pistol in the other, cutting through the pack like something that had stopped being entirely human for the night. Bullets when I had them, blade when I didn't, rifle stock when the blade wasn't enough. Several of the wolves, seeing what I'd become, actually tucked tail and whined rather than press the attack. Black Dragon fought just as hard, gone half feral at the sight of its packmate down in the snow, going straight for throats every time. Urga, bleeding from the arm, rallied the rest of the men. If I was still fighting, he shouted, they had no excuse not to. Weeks of pent-up terror turned to fury, and a dozen makeshift weapons rained down on the wolves in earnest. Outside the wall, the one-eyed alpha finally recognized this bone was too hard to crack, gave a bitter, furious howl, and turned to run. The moment the leader broke, the whole pack collapsed into a rout, scrambling over each other to flee into the dark. I shouted for Old Man Lu not to let the leader escape. He'd been waiting for exactly that moment, steadied his breath, raised the rifle, and put one shot through the alpha just as it leapt for the woodpile, sending it tumbling down in a final, dying howl. The yard erupted in the ragged cheer of people who'd just survived something they hadn't expected to. Dawn came gray and slow, light finally spreading over a yard littered with bodies, some freshly dead, some still twitching out their last. I sat down hard on the step, wiped blood from my face, and lit a crushed cigarette with shaking hands. The door opened. Lin Xiao came stumbling out with Nyunyo, and the sight of me covered in blood dropped her straight to her knees, sobbing. I told her I wasn't dead, grinned through the mess on my face, and pointed her toward the window instead. Go check on Green Dragon first. She found it alive, unconscious, the broken leg a ruin and a chunk gone from its shoulder, but breathing. Still alive meant still savable, and that was enough for now. Urga and a few of the men started clearing the yard, and the count came back staggering. 28 wolves in the yard alone, over 40 counting the ones outside the wall. Nothing like it had ever happened in Kaoshan Tun's history. Old Man Lu, climbing down off the roof, looked at the pile of carcasses with something closer to greed than horror. A good wolf pelt fetched 20 yuan at the purchasing station, and 40-some pelts added up to real money, enough to build 3 brick houses. I told them plainly, anyone who'd fought that night got a share. The alpha's pelt was mine. Old Lu got 3 for his marksmanship, Urga 2 for his wound, and everyone else who'd fought got 1 pelt each plus whatever wolf meat they wanted to carry home for stew. The rest went to the purchasing station as its grand opening haul. The offer landed like a second miracle, 20 yuan a head, 2 months' worth of work points handed out for free. The cheering that followed could be heard clear across the village. That's when Sun Dana finally showed his face, trailing a few militiamen who'd hidden all night, his trousers still damp, trying to claim some credit for the night's victory through sheer nerve. Nobody so much as looked at him. I told him plainly, in front of the whole crowd, to ask himself where he'd been when the wolves came, where he'd been while the rest of us bled for this village, and only now, with the fighting over, did he crawl out to ask for a cut. I told him to get out, loud enough that it rang in his ears, and he fled with what dignity he had left, which wasn't much. Watching the sun rise, watching Lin Xiao tend Green Dragon's wounds, watching the whole yard busy skinning wolves in a mood closer to festival than aftermath, I understood something had shifted for good in Kaoshan Tun. From here forward, there was exactly one person whose word carried weight in this village, and it was mine. By mid-morning, the whole village smelled of stewing wolf meat, 40-some carcasses worth going into the pot at once, rich enough to make even the stray dogs drool. My yard was a hive of activity, skinned pelts stacked into a small gray mountain, a massive cauldron boiling over with meat, Urgas stirring in salt and peppercorns with real enthusiasm. I sat cross-legged on the Kong cleaning Green Dragon's wounds with salt water, and it had come around enough to lick my palm and thump its tail weakly against the mat. Lin Xiao came in glowing, carrying a bowl of washed frozen tofu, announcing the broth had gone milk-white with flavor. Before I could even get outside to serve the meat, an engine roared into the village, not the ragged clatter of a tractor, but something deep and powerful, rolling across the snow like thunder. Every villager froze mid-bite, staring toward the village entrance. A convoy was coming, a green 212 Jeep in the lead, red star gleaming on its hood, followed by two brand-new Liberation trucks with canvas-covered beds, engines roaring, snow flying, diesel smoke trailing black against the white, and a second Jeep bringing up the rear. Old Man Lou's pipe hit the ground, and he didn't even notice. 60 years old, and he'd never seen this many vehicles in the village at once. In a place where even a bicycle was a luxury, that convoy hit harder than the wolves had the night before. The convoy bypassed the village office and the co-op entirely and pulled up directly in front of my gate, beneath the purchasing station sign. Song Wegwa jumped out first, beaming, and opened the lead Jeep's door with real deference. A cloth shoe stepped down into the snow, followed by an older man in a gray mouse suit under an officer's wool coat, hair gray but bearing sharp and commanding, a chairman Mao pin on his lapel. Someone in the crowd recognized him, County Chief Chun, seen once before at a model worker ceremony. The whole village went rigid with awe, clearing a path without being asked. Song introduced me properly, and I stepped forward, offering both hands. Chief Chun didn't head inside right away. His eyes went straight to the mountain of wolf pelts, the stacked meat, the bullet scars and claw marks on the wall. He walked the yard himself, ran a hand over one thick pelt, and told me plainly that when Song had reported the night's events on the drive over, he'd assumed exaggeration. Seeing it firsthand, he called it nothing short of a miracle. I told him the truth, plain. It was the white plague driving starving wolves to desperation, and we'd had no choice but to fight for our lives. If they'd gotten into the village, hundreds of people would have died. He told me I'd done more than save lives. I'd protected a whole district and preserved a valuable state resource besides. Then, in front of the entire assembled village, he shook my hand hard and thanked me formally on behalf of the county government, calling the export situation dire and the country desperately in need of exactly this kind of fur and hide to earn foreign exchange, calling what I'd done a genuine service to the nation. The crowd buzzed at that. Killing wolves for survival was one thing. Hearing the county chief call it a patriotic achievement was another entirely. He had his secretary bring out a banner, red field, gold characters, reading something to the effect of eliminating threats, protecting the people, vanguard of foreign trade, and presented it to me personally. Then he gestured to the two trucks. He told me plainly the county wouldn't let someone who'd done this much go under-resourced. That while Jean Wanfu's promised import truck was still in transit, the county was lending both Liberation trucks, drivers included, to the purchasing station indefinitely, fuel costs covered by the county. 2 trucks, with drivers, fuel paid for. The village stared, stunned. This wasn't a loan, it was a set of wings. Then Chief Chun gestured to crates in the truck beds, 2 tons of diesel, 50 boxes of military ration biscuits, 20 boxes of canned braised pork, all designated as relief supplies for the village after the wolf attack, specifically for the militia and villagers who'd fought that night. The cheering that followed shook the whole yard. Canned meat, in this era, was rarer than a proper New Year's feast. Urga and Old Man Lou led the applause, clapping until their palms went red. Watching from the back of the crowd, son Dana's face went the color of ash. Whatever thin hope he'd had left of reclaiming his standing died, watching the county chief shake my hand like an old friend. Then Chief Chun turned serious and announced the final decision. Given the purchasing station's contribution and its strategic location, the county was formally upgrading it to a county-level key purchasing station. All mountain goods trade across the surrounding district would now run through it, with an official plaque to follow. He asked whether I had confidence enough to carry that weight. I handed the banner to Lin Xiao, who stood there with tears in her eyes, and told the chief plainly, as long as I drew breath, the treasures of these mountains would keep earning real money for the nation and lifting this village with them. I wouldn't let the county down. Chief Chen laughed, clapped me on the shoulder, and said he'd smelled that wolf stew from the road and meant to stay for a bowl himself, see what the Hunter King's cooking tasted like. I told him it would be an honor, called for Lin Xiao to bring out bowls and the good liquor we'd been saving, and the sun broke fully through the clouds over a yard full of laughter, the purchasing station sign catching the light above the door. By noon, the celebration in my yard had nearly wound down. The big cauldron sat scraped clean, buns used to wipe up the last of the broth, gnawed thigh bones piled like kindling along the wall. Villagers sat in twos and threes against the sunny side of the wall, picking their teeth, joking that wolf meat this good was worth 10 years off your life, that this was dragon meat as far as anyone in this village was concerned. As people started saying their goodbyes, pigs to feed, chores waiting, I let most of them go with a wave from the step. But as Urga belched and turned to follow the crowd out, I called his name, quiet enough that only he caught it, and tipped my chin to tell him to hold back. I did the same with a few others in the same offhand way, told Old Man Lu he'd forgotten his pipe, asked Dazhuang and Huzi to help carry some grain sacks inside. Nothing that would draw attention, just enough to keep them there until the yard had emptied out. Once the door shut behind the last departing guest, I waved the four of them to the chairs and the Kong edge, passed around a fresh pack of good cigarettes, and let them wonder for a moment what this was about. Looking at them, Old Man Lu, the war veteran with the marksman's eye, Urga, always a little too bold for his own good, Dazhuang and Huzi, the two toughest young men in the village, I lit my own cigarette and got to it. The county chief had given us trucks, rifles, and an official sign, I told them. That meant one thing. This operation wasn't staying a village-sized business. It was going to grow past Kaoshantan, into the county, maybe further, and I couldn't run collection, escort the trucks, and handle every relationship with the county at once. I needed men I trusted enough to put my back to when trouble came, the same way they'd stood with me against the wolves. That lit something in all four of them. Urga thumped his own chest so hard it must have hurt, swearing his 100-some pounds were mine to command, that I only had to point and he'd hit whatever I pointed at. Dazhuang and Huzi echoed him just as loud. Old Man Lu, quieter but no less certain, said he was too old now for knife fighting, but if I trusted his eye for quality, he could still grade pelts and set prices for a few more years yet. So I laid out the whole structure right there. From that day, the Kaoshantan Mountain Goods Transport Crew existed officially. Urga, sharp, bold, would run transport, learn to drive the trucks himself, and train up a couple of others under him. The county and provincial runs would depend on him. Old Man Lu became chief quality inspector, final word on every grade, every price, veto power over anything that might embarrass us with the state. Dazhuang and Huzi went into security, trained on the 5 semi-automatics we'd been issued, ready to meet any highway robber or troublemaker with force if it came to that. Then I opened the case still sitting on the cabinet and started laying stacks of cash on the table in front of them. I told them plainly that loyalty didn't feed a family. Urga and Old Man Lu would draw 35 yuan a month, Dazhuang and Huzi 30, with a food allowance on the road, a year-end bonus, meat and flour at every holiday, and the promise that if anyone's family hit a crisis, the operation would cover it. The number alone nearly knocked Urga off his chair. 35 yuan was more than most county cadres pulled in a month, more than a farmer might see in a whole year's work point payout. He stammered that it was too much, that it broke every rule he knew. I told him the only rule here was mine, pushed the money toward them, and told them to go home, treat their families well, and let the whole village see what working for me actually looked like. Before they left, I told them the target for the next morning. Yangshu Gully, where a local strongman called Zheng Depeo had the whole mountain trade locked under his thumb, squeezing hunters dry with lowball prices and threats. Tomorrow, I told them, we'd go put an end to that. They looked at each other, money still in hand, and I could see the same fire catching in all of them. Guns, trucks, cash, and a leader willing to put his own money behind his word. This wasn't a supply run they were signing up for. It was a conquest. We rolled out before dawn the next morning, 2 liberation trucks with tire chains biting into the frozen road, engines roaring loud enough to wake the whole village. I rode in the lead truck's passenger seat, rifle across my lap, watching the snow-choked road unwind through the frosted windshield. The driver, a discharged soldier named Xiao Li, borrowed from the county, asked whether we ought to stop at the village office first, given what he'd heard about this Zheng Depeo being the type to cause real trouble. I told him plainly, you give warning to people you intend to deal with. Animals who prey on their own neighbors only understand one thing. I had the county chief's authority behind me, guns, and money. Whatever local tyrant Zheng thought he was, today he was losing his teeth. Told him to floor it. We found Yangshu Gully's threshing ground already in an uproar. 100-some villagers gathered, tense and furious, watching a heavy-set man in black satin lounge in a high-back chair while an old hunter knelt at his feet, begging for a few more cents on 2 squirrel pelts. That was Zheng DePeo. When the old man explained he couldn't afford powder or shot at the price offered, that his wife needed medicine, Zheng kicked him flat and started in with a leather strap, shouting that his word was the only law in Yangshu Gully, that anyone who didn't sell to him would never hunt these mountains again. That's when our trucks came around the bend and didn't slow down, plowed straight through the fence line, and stopped with the bumper inches from Zheng's nose, engine heat and diesel fumes washing over his face. In a place where even a bicycle was a luxury, 2 roaring trucks landing in the middle of the threshing ground looked like something from another planet. I climbed down, didn't spare Zheng a glance at first, just took in the gaunt, threadbare crowd around us, and the blood on the old hunter's face. That's what decided things for me. Dazhuang, Huzi, and Urga fell in behind me in matching sheepskin coats, rifles up, and someone in the crowd gasped that the army had arrived. Zheng, to his credit, tried to bluster through it, demanded to know what territory we thought we were crossing into, started to claim Yangshu Gully's trade as his own. I didn't let him finish. One open-handed slap spun him a full turn and left blood in his teeth. When he tried again to invoke his own name like it meant something, a second slap cut that off too. I told him I didn't care who he was, pulled the county's red-sealed document from my coat, and threw it in his face, told him to read it and understand exactly what kind of trouble strong-arming hunters and interfering with state trade collection would bring down on him. A couple of his men reached for knives. Dazhuang and Huzi had rifles leveled at their skulls before the blades cleared their belts, and that was the end of that particular argument. Hands went up, and at least one of them looked ready to soil himself at the sight of a real weapon pointed his way. I left Zheng where he sat and went to the old hunter instead, helped him up, brushed the snow and boot prints off his coat, and told him I wasn't paying 70 cents for those pelts. When he flinched, expecting an even worse robbery, I had Dazhuang throw back the tarp on the truck bed, cases of cash inside, stacked and banded, glowing red in the sunlight, and counted out 3 yuan on the spot for pelts worth double what Zheng had ever offered. The crowd exploded. A yuan 50 a pelt, cash in hand. More than double Zheng's best price, and none of his usual excuses about paying later. The fear that had kept them silent for years evaporated on the spot, and people surged forward with everything they'd been hoarding, terrified the opportunity might vanish as fast as it had appeared. I climbed onto the truck's running board and addressed the whole crowd. From today, the Kaoshan Ton purchasing station was taking over trade across this whole district. Squirrel, pheasant, roe deer, mushrooms, wood ear fungus, ginseng, deer antler, whatever the mountain gave, I'd buy, at 10% over the co-op's rate and double what Zheng had ever paid. Old man Lu took up grading. Urga handled the money. Dazhuang and Huzi stood watch, and I made clear that anyone, Zheng included, who tried to disrupt the trade would get a rifle but for their trouble, and I'd personally answer for whatever followed. What came after was pure chaos in the best sense. Lu's practiced sorting pelts by grade in seconds, Urga's abacus clicking non-stop, real money landing in calloused hands that had never held that much at once. Zheng sat slumped against the wall, face swelling, watching the crowd he used to control flock instead around me, and understood. Yangshu Gully belonged to someone else now. That afternoon I drove into the commune compound to settle paperwork, and walked in on Zheng DePeo already there ahead of me, sobbing to the commune director, who turned out to be his own brother-in-law, that bandits had wrecked his operation and needed arresting immediately. The director, already furious about his year-end export quotas, was reaching for the phone to call the police when I kicked the door open with Urga and 2 armed escorts behind me. Zheng shrieked that I'd stormed the commune office armed, that it was practically insurrection, that they should shoot me on the spot. The director, rattled by the sight of real rifles but unwilling to back down in front of his own staff, ordered his security office to cuff me, a threat that meant nothing once I sat myself down on his sofa, let Urga light my cigarette, and asked plainly whether he really intended to arrest me and impound my trucks. He tried to hold the line, accused me of assault, of vandalism, of undermining state order in his jurisdiction. I asked him, not unkindly, Whether a man who beat old hunters bloody and robbed them blind counted as the people in his book, and whether Zheng happened to be his brother-in-law. That got a flustered denial and a fresh round of bluster about following the law regardless of who was involved. So I let the document do the talking, dropped the red-sealed county directive on his desk. The moment he read past the title, protected status, personal endorsement from the county chief, explicit authorization to carry arms in self-defense, the color drained straight out of his face. He understood, in the space of 2 sentences, that he'd nearly arrested a decorated state asset on the say-so of his own crooked in-law. Zheng, still not reading the room, kept howling for his brother-in-law to arrest me, insisting the document had to be forged. That's when the director backhanded him himself, hard enough to knock him sprawling, and disowned him on the spot in front of the whole office, calling him a disgrace who'd nearly gotten them both ruined, and had his own staff drag Zheng off for investigation. Once the office cleared, I stood, ground out my cigarette, and told the director this once could be forgotten, but he'd best keep his eyes open about which relatives he vouched for going forward. He fell over himself stamping every piece of paperwork I needed, hands shaking too badly to even ink the seal properly at first. I walked out into the evening sun with everything squared away. Yangshu Gully was settled. The commune's cooperation was secured. But I already knew this was only the opening move. 4 days later, before sunrise, we split the operation into 2 columns and pushed further out. I took the northern route into the poorest, most wind-battered hollows, places the co-op's own cart drivers refused to climb to in winter. Urga and Dazhuang took the softer southern roads. I told both crews the same thing before we left. We were traders, not bandits. Fair prices, cash on the spot. But if anyone tried the same trick Zheng had, a warning shot came first, and if that didn't settle it, force would. In the north, I found villagers too poor and too cold to trust a stranger's promises, so I didn't just recite prices. I knelt down, bought a frozen pheasant off a shivering child's hands for 4 times its worth in cash, right in front of the whole hamlet, and watched disbelief turn to a stampede toward every root cellar and attic in the village. In the south, a knot of local toughs tried to shake Urga down for a toll before he'd sell a single scale. Dazhuang answered with 1 shot into the air and a rifle leveled at the ringleader's skull, and the toll collectors fled wetting themselves. By evening, both trucks rolled home stacked past the rails, rope the only thing keeping the loads from spilling, top-grade sable, squirrel pelts, tons of goods gathered across a whole district in a single day. I told Lin Xiu to clear every spare room in the house. We'd be sorting by lamplight all night, because tomorrow there was harder work still ahead. The next morning, I woke to a sound that had nothing to do with the usual village noise, something closer to a market in full swing. Lin Xiu burst in, half panicked and half thrilled, telling me our own front gate was blocked by a crowd. I threw on my coat and went out expecting trouble. What I found instead stopped even me for a second. The street outside our yard, all the way back to the village entrance, was packed solid. Donkey carts, sledges, men who'd walked in on foot with sacks over their shoulders, fur hats bobbing in a haze of frozen breath. Someone spotted me and shouted that the manager was out, and the whole crowd surged forward at once. A village head calling out 500 caddies of hazelnuts, a hunter from another hollow holding up prize fox pelts he'd saved specially for me. Voices overlapping, everyone certain that if they didn't push forward now, the opportunity would vanish. I understood immediately what this was. Word had spread about the provincial trade office connection, about cash paid on the spot, about a fair price nobody had to beg for, and every hunter and mountain family for miles who'd spent years accepting whatever the co-op felt like offering had decided this was worth a night's walk to see for themselves. I felt the pull of it. This was momentum building on itself, the kind that feeds a fire once it catches. I planted myself on the step and raised my voice loud enough to cut through the noise. No shoving. Whoever had come had done me the honor of trusting me, and I'd buy anything good, cash in hand, no IOUs, but it would happen on my terms. I called Urga and Dazhuang out to organize a proper line, set up a table and ledger, and told the crowd plainly that anyone caught cutting in or passing off inferior goods as good would be turned away without argument. The promise of "I'll take it all" settled the crowd instantly. These were people who didn't mind waiting in line, only feared being shut out entirely. Within minutes, what had been chaos turned into an orderly queue, and my yard became, For the day, the busiest trading post in the whole district. 300 caddies of dried mushrooms from one village at top grade, 10 squirrel pelts, and a sable from another. The abacus and the cash both moving nonstop. At one point, a bearded man in a good sheepskin coat pushed through with liquor and cigarettes in hand, introducing himself as the newly appointed brigade leader of Yangshu Gully, told everyone to call him Oldly, practically apologizing on behalf of the whole village for what Zheng Depeo had done, now that Zheng was under investigation and getting exactly what he deserved. I waved off the gifts but shook his hand warmly, told him Zheng's sins weren't the village's sins, that good goods were good goods regardless of who brought them, and invited him in for tea. By mid-morning, I'd had 7 or 8 local officials come by in the same spirit, all wanting to be on good terms with whoever was clearly running things now. By noon, the problem became almost comic in its scale. Urga came in sweating, voice worn ragged, to report that every storeroom in the house was full, even the west wing meant for odds and ends, even the kitchen, which old man Liu had commandeered for pelt storage. There was nowhere left to put anything. I stepped out and saw it myself. 3 small mountains of goods piled in the yard, held together mostly by the fact that the cold had frozen everything solid. A dozen more carts still waited to unload at the gate. I asked Urga how much cash we had left. Not much, he admitted. The 5,000 from the day before plus whatever reserve we'd had was down to under 2,000 after one morning's buying. Looking at the yard, then at the 2 already loaded trucks, I understood the real problem. Kaoshan Tun itself had become too small a pond for what we were pulling in. It was time to move. I told Urga to keep buying, pile the overflow in the house itself if we had to, and I'd borrow money if the cash ran dry. Then I announced the day's collection would be the last for a while. Tomorrow, we'd close. When Urga asked why, I walked to the truck, laid a hand on its cold door, and looked south, toward the provincial capital. Because it was time to turn all of this into real money, I told him. Get the tanks filled. Have Dazhuang and Huzi check every rifle and every round. Load everything tonight. We were leaving for the city at 3 in the morning. The drive was brutal. 2 overloaded trucks carrying the whole village's hopes crawled along snow-buried mountain roads for 10 straight hours, starting before dawn and not clearing the last ridge until noon. When the city finally came into view, Urga went silent, face pressed to the frosted window, jaw hanging open. Below us on the horizon sprawled a city of real scale, smokestacks lining the Songhua River, the unmistakable signature of the nation's industrial heart. I lit a cigarette to shake off the drive and told him that was the Songhua River bridge ahead. Cross it, and we'd be in the real provincial capital. Crossing into the city proper hit all of us harder than I expected. Harbin, the Paris of the East, they called it, greeted us with trolley cars clanging down broad avenues, Russian-style buildings with domed and peaked roofs in cream and dark green, windows taller than a man. The people matched the buildings, men in sharp wool coats and otter fur hats, women in bright scarves, even a few blonde foreigners walking the sidewalks like they belonged there. Against that, our 2 mud-caked trucks and a crew of unshaven men in sheepskin coats tied with rope looked exactly like what we were. Urga pulled his own coat tighter, voice gone thin, worrying aloud whether we'd embarrass the whole county just standing there. In the truck bed, Dazhuang and Huzi had gone quiet too, hunched under the tarp with their rifles, clearly worried about drawing police attention. I reached over and straightened Urga's collar myself, told him to sit up straight. We hadn't stolen anything. We were bringing something the whole country needed, earning foreign exchange in the truest sense. On a smaller scale, we were the ones actually feeding these city dwellers, however sharp their coats looked. I told him plainly, strip the furs in our truck bed, and you could buy half that street they were gawking at. That steadied him some. I told him to hold on. We were headed for the Trade Bureau. The Provincial Trade Bureau sat in a red brick Soviet-style building in Nangang District. Guards posted stiff at the gate. The county's red-sealed letter got us waved through without trouble, and we parked in the wide rear courtyard. I told the crew to stay with the trucks and not wander, then went in with Urga. Inside, the department head, Sun Jiangwo, mid-40s, buttoned up in a crisp mouse suit, hair slicked flat, kept us standing 5 full minutes before he even looked up from his paperwork. When he finally acknowledged us, his tone was pure bureaucratic courtesy. The county had called ahead. He understood we'd traveled far, but Jean Wanfu was tied up in meetings with provincial leadership, so he'd be handling this shipment personally. He stood, put on his coat, and told us plainly that if the quality didn't meet standard, no special authorization from anyone would save it from being turned away. Out in the yard, he circled the trucks twice before having Dazhuang pull back the tarp. The moment that deep, oiled purple caught the winter light, sable, squirrel, firefox pelts stacked deep, his professional detachment cracked for exactly 1 visible second. He knew immediately what he was looking at: top-grade goods, better than anything sitting in his own bureau's stockroom. Landing this shipment would make Jin Wanfu's difficult standards easy to satisfy. Real, tangible credit toward a promotion everyone knew was coming open soon. But he recovered fast, picked up a sable pelt, tugged at it, and blew across the fur like he'd found a flaw, and pronounced the whole batch roughly processed, ungraded goods from scattered individual hunters, not properly tanned through a certified facility, technically falling under substandard by Bureau regulation. He cited year-end foreign exchange constraints, the Bureau's repeated directives about thrift, and offered, as a personal favor, invoking the county chief's name, third-grade pricing on the sable, fourth grade on the squirrel, 20 cents a pelt on the rest. A total check for 3,500 yuan. Erga's restraint broke instantly. He stepped forward, pointing at the loaded trucks, eyes red with fury. We'd spent nearly 5,000 yuan just buying this from the villages, hundreds more on fuel, and this was Jin Wanfu's specifically requested top-grade stock, being graded down to a number that would bankrupt us on the trip alone. Sun's polished manner dropped instantly into something harder. This wasn't a village market, he snapped. He was a state cadre responsible for protecting the nation's finances, and paying inflated prices meant loss of state assets, a responsibility nobody wanted to own. He told us, with the smug certainty of a man handing down wisdom, that we should be proud to sacrifice a little profit for the greater good. That was what political consciousness meant. And besides, without his signature, this shipment couldn't be sold anywhere in the city. Hauling it back would cost more in fuel than we'd ever recover. That was the real knife, not corruption for personal gain, but self-righteous frugality weaponized so that objecting made you look selfish. Erga shook with rage, fists clenched, but couldn't find a counter-argument that didn't sound like greed against a man supposedly protecting the state's money. I put a hand on his shoulder before it went further. I wasn't angry. If anything, I told Sun, with something close to admiration, that he was quite the dedicated cadre, willing to squeeze the marrow out of Hunter's bones for the sake of the Bureau's books and his own career prospects. Impressive, really. Sun's face tightened. He told me to stop being clever, unload and take the money, or leave. I told Dazhuang to unload it. Erga nearly wept, certain we were taking a crippling loss. I repeated the order, harder this time, and the crew, red-eyed, carried bundle after bundle of top-grade sable down and stacked it at Sun's feet. Sun watched with a satisfied little smile, clearly convinced country folk were easy enough to bully with a few threats and the right bureaucratic language. Grade the shipment low, reported to Jin Wanfu as top grade after the fact, save the state money on paper, complete the reception assignment. 2 birds, 1 stone. Once the goods were unloaded, I took the 3,500 yuan check without even looking at it and pocketed it. Then I walked back over to Sun, already gesturing for his men to haul the goods inside. I told him plainly, the goods were his. We'd accept the money as settled. But I had one message to carry back to every hunter for miles, on their behalf. This shipment, I told him, was the last Kaoshan ton would ever bring to this city. When I got home, I'd tell every hunter in the mountains that the Provincial Bureau's own section chief Sun had ground their earnings into the floor to save the state a few yuan on paper. The supply line out of the greater Xing'an range, I told him, ended here today. If Jin Wanfu wanted top-grade sable, ginseng, tiger bone again, he could stop looking for me or the commune. He could come find section chief Sun instead, since the chief clearly had such a talent for conjuring goods out of nothing. I brushed an imaginary speck of dust off his lapel and turned to leave without waiting for a response, calling Erga to load up and head home. Sun's satisfied smile froze on his face. The wind hit different once the implications caught up with him. Jin Wanfu's order wasn't a one-time favor. It was a standing contract. If this pricing dispute choked off the entire commune's supply chain, what would he hand over next time Jin came asking? Losing the supplier over a few hundred yuan of short-term savings wouldn't read as thrift to his superiors. It would read as a section chief who'd personally driven away a foreign investor's supply chain through petty greed. That wasn't a promotion. That was a career-ending mistake with his own signature on it. Wait. He was running after the trucks before he'd even finished the thought, ignoring the mud, ignoring his own dignity, grabbing at the mirror on the driver's side, sweat pouring down his face despite the cold. Brother Zhao, don't go, don't go. Look, there's no need for this kind of temper. Policy has some give in it. People do too. We can talk this through. We can work something out. I rolled the window down and looked at him from the cab, unhurried, blowing a slow ring of smoke. Section Chief Sunday. So we're not saving the state money after all. No, no need. None at all. He mopped at his face, forcing a smile that made every muscle in his cheeks twitch. Protecting the resource, keeping hunters motivated to keep supplying. That's the real savings. Top grade. We'll process the whole batch as top grade. Once he'd caught his breath, Sun didn't let the panic linger visibly for long. He pulled out a handkerchief, wiped his forehead and temples with real care, straightened his crooked collar, and took a deliberate breath before speaking again. The composure of a man trained to keep his face steady even with the house on fire behind him. He told me, dropping the bureaucratic tone for something closer to sincere, that what I'd said stung. But it was a fair wake-up call, that he'd been so focused on saving the bureau money that he'd nearly lost sight of the bigger picture, and that choking off the supply chain permanently would make him the one truly responsible for hurting the province's trade position. He tapped the truck door and told us to come back down. He'd take responsibility, process the whole shipment as top grade, special exception. Watching him recover his footing that fast, I had to give him credit. This was a man who knew how to bend without breaking and dress up backing down his principle. I let him have the win gracefully, told him his generosity was appreciated, and had the crew start unloading again. At the finance office, though, the old accountant just spread his hands. The books were closed for the year, no cash available until March. Urga panicked outright. What were we supposed to tell the villagers waiting on that money for New Year's rice? Sun, embarrassed after making such grand promises, tried the bureaucratic softener again. Offer an official IOU, stamped with the Bureau's seal, first in line once funds came through after the new year. I'd seen this trick before in my old life. An IOU like that was worthless the moment you walked out the door, subject to inflation, to a change in leadership, to being quietly forgotten. I didn't argue. I lit a cigarette instead, took my time with it, and then did something nobody expected. I snatched the half-filled intake form out of the old accountant's hands and tore it to shreds in front of Sun. He was aghast. I dropped the pieces in the trash, dusted my hands, and told him plainly, if the Bureau had no money, then this shipment was no longer his concern. I called Urga to start reloading the trucks. Sun, bewildered, asked where exactly I thought I could sell state-grade furs in this city without going through his office. I reminded him, mildly, almost amused, that Harbin had more than one address. There was also the train station, where Soviet traders and Southern buyers were reportedly hunting for exactly this kind of top-grade fur. Park the trucks there for half an hour, I told him, and the whole shipment would be cash, quite possibly at a better price than his office had offered. That set him off again. Accusations of speculation, of undermining socialist trade, threats to call in his security office. I didn't even look up this time. I just kept walking, telling Urga loudly enough for Sun to hear that we'd head straight to the provincial committee's front gate and make our complaint publicly, that a trade bureau chief was trying to arrest the very hunters bringing in state export goods over his own office's failure to pay. That broke him completely. He caught up, grabbed my sleeve with both hands, sweating through his collar, calling me his own ancestor in his desperation, begging me not to be rash. I asked him plainly where the money was. He admitted he'd find a way, right now, and dragged me off to find Jean Wanfu himself, explaining as we went that Jean held special foreign exchange authorization that could, irregularly but legally enough, advance the payment immediately if he personally approved it. That was exactly the outcome I'd been steering toward from the start, though I kept my face reluctant. Sun promised to handle all the talking himself, swore he'd bow to Jean if that's what it took to keep the shipment. We found Jean Wanfu in the lobby of the International Hotel, crystal chandeliers overhead doing nothing to lighten the frustration on his face. He was mid-conversation with the provincial bureau director, a man named Lee, shaking his head over some samples in his hand, explaining that Moscow's March Trade Exhibition was the country's first real shot at re-entering the international fur market, and what he'd seen so far wouldn't survive contact with the sharp-eyed Soviet buyers there. Without a truly top-tier showpiece, he said, there'd be no pricing leverage at all, and time was running out. Then, as if struck by a thought, he stopped mid-sentence and turned to Director Lee, mentioned, almost offhand, that he'd just remembered someone who might help. The hunter who'd taken down a 400 catty iron-backed bear and pulled the gallbladder that saved his father's life. A man capable of that, he reasoned, might have real wild-caught goods worth showing. Director Lee's eyes lit up immediately, already asking where to find this man, ready to send a car. That's when Sun came rushing up, sweating, still holding a corner of my cloth sack, breathless with excitement, announcing that the young comrade from Xianyang Commune standing right there had brought in a full truckload of quality wild pelts, and asking urgently whether this shipment might solve the Moscow shortfall. Director Lee's attention snapped fully onto us, but it was Jin Wanfu who reacted first, hearing Xianyang Commune. He looked up from adjusting his scarf, eyes landing on the young man in the sheepskin coat, standing quietly nearby. His hand froze mid-motion. He took off his glasses, squinted, and his face broke into open astonishment. Xiao Zhao. I gave a small, genuine bow. It's me, Mr. Jin. Good to see you again. I gestured at the sack beside me, casual as a neighbor dropping off a gift. Passing through the city, thought I'd bring you some mountain specialties, figured you might have use for them. Jin's delight was immediate and total. The very hunter he'd just been describing to Director Lee, standing right in front of him by pure coincidence. He pushed past Director Lee's attempt to inspect the goods himself, strode forward, and announced to the stunned director that this was the man he'd just been talking about, the one who'd taken the bear gallbladder, his own family's benefactor. I waved that off with practiced modesty, not too humble, not too proud, telling him he was too generous, that it was just some mountain goods, and I hoped he wouldn't mind them. Director Lee looked between Jin's excitement and my calm, then at Sun sweating beside us, and after a beat of confusion, slapped his own thigh and burst out laughing, declaring this wasn't a delivery at all, it was heaven sending exactly the rain they needed. He ordered Sun to escort us to the VIP room immediately so they could examine the goods properly. In the hotel's private viewing room, thick velvet curtains shutting out the city noise, nothing broke the silence but the occasional crack of the charcoal fire. A dozen some sable pelts lay spread across the long table. Jin Wanfu, wearing white gloves, worked through them with a magnifying glass in complete concentration, holding fur up against the light, testing the stiffness of the guard hairs with his fingertips, saying nothing for a full 10 minutes. Finally, he set the glass down, removed the gloves, and took a sip of tea, satisfaction plain on his face. First grade, he pronounced, glossy guard hair, rich undercoat, not a stray hair out of place, genuinely wild-caught. More than enough to cover the province's export quota shortfall on their own. Director Lee exhaled, visibly relieved, ready to offer some closing pleasantries. But Jin wasn't finished. He set his cup down, drummed his fingers on the table, and admitted that as good as this batch was, it still wasn't enough to outshine the Soviets at Moscow. Siberia was Sable's home ground. With supply to spare, and first-grade pelts alone would only let China's delegation trail behind, never set the price. He turned to me directly. I was the expert here, he said. Let's speak plainly. Beyond first-grade stock, could the greater Xing'an range produce something rarer, the kind of pelt that stopped people in their tracks? The room went quiet. I turned the stub of my cigarette over in my fingers and, without much drama, shook my head. Difficult, I told him. He knew the trade. Pelts graded in tiers, and above first grade. It came down to luck as much as skill. I pointed to the pelts on the table. Most first-grade furs came from snares or gunshots. That one there, good color, but a tiny hole at the neck from a small caliber round, stitched over, invisible to most, but any real expert would call that damaged. Another had trap wear on the legs, blood not fully drained, hide gone slightly stiff. What he actually wanted, I explained, was what hunters called a black pearl, a pelt from a sable that had lived 3 to 5 years or more, coat gone black shot through with purple like silk, and, the truly difficult part, not a single needle mark or blemish anywhere on the hide. Director Lee, baffled, asked how you'd even catch something like that without leaving a mark, a net? I told him Sable were too cunning for nets. A flawless pelt only came from the hard way, denting it in, blocking every exit but one, setting a live snare at the last opening, or smoking it into a stupor and hand-skinning it while stunned. Only a pelt taken that way kept its full vitality and shine. But, I added, that kind of work depended entirely on timing and conditions. Right now, deep winter, the snow was too soft to walk in without sinking to the thigh, and Sable denayed up for weeks at a stretch this time of year. Even finding one worth pursuing was uncertain. Before you even got to the cold itself, deadly on its own, or the starving wolf packs that came with it. Gene listened to all of this with real attention. He didn't take the word difficult as an excuse. If anything, his respect deepened. He'd met plenty of men who talked a big game. Only someone who genuinely knew the trade laid out the obstacles this plainly, down to the smallest detail. He nodded, told me I was right. If it were easy, he wouldn't be this worried in the first place. Since I'd been honest with him, he'd be honest back. He'd take the whole first-grade batch, cash, full price. As for the Black Pearl, he wasn't asking me to risk my life for it immediately, but he wanted me to keep it in mind. Once the new year passed and the snow crust hardened, or whenever conditions allowed, would I be willing to go after one for him? Whether or not I actually caught anything, my willingness to try would already earn half his trust. I thought it over, the terrain, what the weather would likely do come spring, and told him plainly, yes. Given the right gear, once the snow hardened enough to travel, I'd take a crew in. I couldn't promise a Black Pearl, but as long as one still existed anywhere in these mountains, I'd track it down by its own footprints if I had to. That got a delighted laugh and a slap on his own knee. That was exactly the kind of grit he wanted to back, he said. He turned to Director Lee and told him to settle accounts. He'd take the entire shipment, cash, full stop, and to let me head home in style for the new year, the Black Pearl a matter for another day. Director Lee, thrilled at how neatly the crisis had resolved itself, ordered Sun to walk us straight to finance and make sure not a single yuan was shorted. 20 minutes later, the finance chief walked in with a heavy canvas bag. 12,850 yuan, he announced, and asked me to count it. Urga and Dazhuang stopped breathing at the sight of that much cash banded neatly together. More money than either of them could have earned in a lifetime of farming. I gave it one glance, zipped the bag shut, and handed it to Urga to carry. Then I stood, bowed to Jean Wanfu and Director Lee, and told them we wouldn't impose further. There was still business to attend to before heading home. Jean asked, curious, where that business might be. I straightened my coat and told him plainly, the department store. A craftsman needs proper tools before proper work. If I was going after something rare come spring, those old single-shot muskets weren't going to cut it anymore. I needed a real pair of double-barreled hunting rifles.